We know times are strange. We know how you've pain. Time to break the game. Make them feel the same. Lost too many not to stay. For all their lies and their games. As the world stands, we can't back away. The truth will come. The truth will come today. The truth will come, whether or not you stay. 'Cause when we stand, their power drifts away. Will you stand? Will you stand? Will you stand with me? We know what they've done, what they've stolen and what they've shunned. Time to grab your gun. They're coming for everyone. They come for you, what will you say? Dragging you down, never to see the day. Will you stand, or will you back away? The truth will come, whether or not you stay. The truth will come. The truth will come today. 'Cause when we stand, their power drifts away. Will you stand? Will you stand with me? Will you stand with me? We know it's hard to change. We know there'll be pain. Nothing will be the same. But we will preserve the flame. We will remove all they have grown. Undo, unteach all they have shown. And we will strike a path, guiding us back home. The truth will come. The truth will come today. The truth will come, whether or not you stay. 'Cause when we stand, their power drifts away.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Definitely, just the song was playing right there, by the way, before I jump into what I'm going to get into today. That's one of the new songs I put out for, I guess, just under the last American Vagabond that I put out. That I'll be playing some of these at the upcoming Third Eye Carnival. There'll be a link included today that I'll touch on in a second. That'll be coming up between the 4th and the 6th. Actually tagged this earlier today about kind of what my plan will be going over the next week. Planning to do some, doing the show still where I can, but trying to do some smaller things as throughout the carnival, like in the RV, having people come in and have conversations, having it set up to kind of have some kind of on the road interviews and so on. And I had a little bit of an extra time, by the way, for those that might have been confused. I put this out with the wrong time, basically an hour from now. And I realized I made a mistake with my clock when I reset it in here. So I was an hour ahead of time. So I'm sorry if anybody was caught off guard with the timing, and I had a few things to catch up on the back. And that's why I decided to play that to start. So thank you for tuning in today. I think the obvious follow-up to this, the main focal point today, I've one other thing really before it. The main focal point is, again, the ongoing just collapse, or rather the lack of acknowledgement of our constitutional rights by the very group professing to fight for them more than anybody. And I don't, and make sure you understand that from my perspective, that is not different groups. It is one part of the same group, which is simply your U.S. government. But in this case, the right part of that government that are all working in the same direction really use the argument they're fighting for your rights or your freedom or your liberty more than anybody. And it seems right now exposing themselves to be some of the most, working to undermine them. Maybe they just don't believe in them at all. It's kind of terrifying to see how this is going forward. And again, the evolution of the conversation around deportations has been, and it usually is with the partisan field, that something starts and we look at it and we go, well, that's pretty incredible because due process, and well, they're here illegally. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't actually apply, seeing as how even illegal immigrants do have constitutional rights. And we'll make that point for the 15th time today. But then, then it evolves. Oh, but wait, it turns out there was somebody who here was under, had a legal green card. And, oh, well, they were supporting terrorism. Okay, well, that still doesn't matter, seeing as how there should be a due process to make those claims and prove those claims. And even then, the point is there are laws in the books to deal with these things. And and now we're getting to the point, and we've been following up on this the entire time. I probably 7 different people I can point to today, or people that were talking, like, I've already made the point about the person that was here under asylum. That's a legal reality that took place before he was deported. So he was here legally. Then there's people with green cards, like the Khalil conversation, which is not even debatable. And then especially that we get back to it now, and the time has been to flesh out, the evidence is presented, no one's challenged. There is no evidence. He did not do any of the things they claimed he did. The best they could do was connect it to some other entity. It was lazy. It makes you wonder why. They had other opportunities they could have used. But so that is a legal person, a person here legally who did not break the law, who was deported because he had opinions they don't like. That is the reality, no matter what the screaming partisans are saying on either side. That's provable. Now we're going to go over many more examples today. And at this point, I'm wondering what the reality is of any of this, any of the people that were sent there, and showing people who are legally in this country with no criminal record, who are sent to just for those out there that aren't aware, and I'm going to go through it today, think Guantanamo Bay. And like the kind of stuff that we know took place there at the behest of the U.S. government. Horrible things that are happening that are on the record from Human Rights Watch that they proudly talk about from El Salvador, that have worked with the U.S. government for a while through Biden's administration. Now in this, weird, the overlap. I thought Biden and Trump were different and they fought each other, but we're using things that were built then and applying now. It is really insane. And so the main point of today is to highlight the fact that regardless of what side you think you're on, whether you think some parts of this country are your enemy or your neighbor or whatever it is, if you believe you're fighting to uphold the values of this country, let's just make it specific, constitutional rights. If you think that's an important fight, then you need to call out what's happening here, because it is dangerous. Even if you want to think they're doing everything with the best of intentions and just made some mistakes, yes, that's a problem. A huge, monumental, life-changing problem. I could add them. The point is that what they're doing is going to continue to dissolve I guess, the Constitution. I always hesitate on that because let's remember that it's not something they can do away with. Even if legislation passes that says these things don't matter, that is still repugnant to the Constitution. And the Supreme Court ruling more than once has made the case. If it's repugnant to the Constitution, it is null and void. So the reality is we are watching the precedents continue to go forward that slowly create the reality in people's minds that these things are a switch that can be turned on and off. Now, they're starting with the Aliens Enemies Act, because that is what gives them in their mind, even though even that is on legal, flimsy ground, the argument, the pathway to remove people who they claim are terrorists. So that's why they went on to go, okay, well, now this group's a terrorist. Well, okay, but what happens if we're simply pointing at some guy with a rainbow tattoo? Well, let's call him part of the gang that we called terrorists, and that works for us. Now, whether this is a conscious choice or not, we can prove that they did this in a way that would guarantee there was really no pushback. Like, I mean, in the sense of like the people, the ICE agents that were picking these people up will go through the information they have, even though Leave It is pushing back to people in a very aggressive, flailing way to kind of make it about a broad story. We'll go over that too as well. The reality is the points are public. You can see it for yourself. What they did was arbitrary. They have a tattoo, they have a certain skin color, and they're from a certain country, get rid of them. And now they're even starting to sort of make that case, knowing this is falling apart. They say, well, we can get rid of whoever we want. That's a drain on this country. I think Rubio said something very similar, saying that, implying that, well, if they're not terrorists, that it's okay because they were draining on this country. Legally here, with jobs here for years, in some cases, with families, but they're draining this country because they're taking advantage of the people who hate whoever they're pointed at to hate. A lot of them, and let's realize it's just like the left. Don't take this as a partisan thing, but the case is that you can see people on the right of the conversation who have been worked up in a frenzy to hate anybody who might have been in this country or just with a different color, or people who've come here because their countries are destroyed because of U.S. policy and are seeking asylum, which is the whole point of that process. On the left, you see the same thing where you got them hating certain people because of their skin color, or because they wear certain clothing, or because they have certain ideology, and it's hate, and it's unbridled, and it is unnecessary, and it is driven into them. And that partisan anger, that divide is what keeps this country from changing. And now people are getting swept up, thrown out, put in concentration camps because they have the wrong ideas. On top of that, they've already floated the idea more than once that Americans could be next. And I'll play that clip again because it seems like people just don't want to acknowledge that he said that and then followed up on it and doubled down on it. How you don't see the concern when these openly at least floating the idea of Americans being next because they committed terrorism, which they're pointing to people vandalizing Teslas. Now, I will follow up on that story, and then one of the next shows, I already have it pulled to the side, about the people being arrested, and it's arrest them for vandalism and arson. That's a federal crime. And in fact, they can actually get 20 years in prison. That's not even bombastic. But the person who committed arson and vandalism combined, that's about it seems like the highest level, but what you would expect. But they're saying everybody who keys a car, and that's not my opinion. They're saying that if you're going after them, they're going after you. Meanwhile, all these other important things are happening. Is that what they promised? What are the Epstein files? So many places to go. The reality is this is all happening under a guise of fighting for what you want. And the reality is it's actually undermining exactly what you think you're fighting for. Just find the courage to call it out. So I want to start with an article that Derek just put out today, because this isn't the focal point today, but it's a follow-up. Because we promised you we would. Derek did, and he's been following this story. It's actually disconcerting. I mean, I don't want to go into it right now because there's a lot of points I'm going to want to jump into. The main crux of the point is David Hamblin, who is, the evidence is overwhelming about this person, child abuse, in this case from the Utah County Sheriff's Department, ritualistic child abuse. That's not to say satanic. That's the way they've conflated him in this case to try to ultimately get him dismissed. But he has now gotten the charges dismissed. There's so many. The background of the case goes back a long way. 90s, 2002, where he's been charged, even by his family members, of ritualistic abuse, of child abuse, rape, all sorts of horrible things. And it got dismissed back then for absurd reasons. We've went through it in depth. Here we are again. They're claiming the sheriff's department refused to give them certain documents, and that's one of the main reasons they've dismissed this. The sheriff's department spoke up and said, we gave you those in 2022. And everyone around here is going, here we go again. This is what seems to happen in Utah, specifically around the Mormon church. Now, right after this has been dismissed now, ritualistic sex abuse charges dismissed against admitted child abuser, because that is on the record. What's crazy about it is as they're dismissing this for some arbitrary seeming, administrative thing, he has another case in another county. I think it's San Pete County, right across the way, right now for more child abuse charges in a different county. We'll see if those get dismissed as well. Imagine having so much evidence and so many multiple allegations in different locations across different years and have it consistently be removed, ignored. I mean, in some cases, just dropped because nothing ends up following. I mean, it's you go through it for yourself. Again, it's something that's important to go through. I'm probably going to have Derek back on soon to talk about all this, but make sure you read it. Because you have to understand that it's not just, foreign policy. It's not just about one. There's a lot of things going on in the world. And the reality is that government, it's in most ways in the world today, maybe it doesn't always have to be, but from my perspective, is just organized crime, guys. And it's abused everywhere I can see. It's pretty alarming. But we'll follow up on this for sure, because it's not going to go away. I mean, there's still more cases to follow up on that are still going to, be fleshed out in court. And I just think we need to realize, and on a side note, by the way, that we're probably going to follow up on more which is funny. It's kind of, it counters what I was kind of saying right there, but it's not because it's searched out. It's because it's prevalent and it's there. There is an obvious, and shocking connection on the record between Zionism and the Mormon Church. Surprise, surprise. If you dig into the background around pretty much every majorly horrible event that we can think of, you will find Zionism fingerprints all over it. That's not my opinion. You can prove that. So why would that be ignored? Because you're afraid to be called a racist. If Zionism was explicitly and in depth involved with the Rwanda genocide or the Bosnia genocide or the ongoing genocide, we should start going, maybe there's something to that. Not even maybe, the evidence is provable. You can see them doing it, but whatever. Bottom line is, I think that might be followed up on in an upcoming discussion. This in and of itself is horrible and needs to be called out. Now, I want to start with a quick point. It's just, the only reason I want to reiterate this is because I keep making this point, and sadly enough, I'm glad I remember this now. A show before last I just did. I've done this before, and I kick myself when I make this. I have notes going off, and or rather alarms and things I set to make sure I don't forget this every day. Is that I forget to save the tabs. Show before last, some crazy turn of events, I forgot to save all the tabs. I've already saved the ones from today. And I got done with the show and I closed them as I go, and I lost all the tabs. So same as always, guys, you can watch the show. The URL is right there. You can see it as I go. So you can take the time to type it out if you want. So it is there, technically still there if you want to find the things, but the links are not on the show. So I apologize about that. The point was, one of them was a show where I went super in depth on the USA spending overlap. And it kills me that you still get this pushback. Like I comment about this and people go, that's crazy. You're a lunatic. You're a left crazy, whatever. The reality is Donald Trump is currently spending money, or rather, again, I say that because it's important to get people to frame it how they see, what's important to them. It is just your U.S. government that I see no different than either side. But in this current Trump administration, they are still right this moment funding to the tune of $30+ million AIDS prevention and male circumcision in Africa right now. And the reason I even bring it up again is because I keep getting pushback on this like it's not true. So please, guys, put this out there. So first, and I'm going to show them to you yet again for these people that are pushing back like we're making things up as they call it out on one side. The USAID point is overlap with this, so I want to highlight this as well. We just talked about it. Oh, and here is the show. Oh, here, damn it. Let's just go to the website. So the point is we just talked about USAID allegedly closing down again for the second time, even though neither time it's actually what's happening. Here's the show. I'll include it for the show notes. But as I said then, they're just like Alex Jones. I called him out for it. That's this one here. And so he says, Trump strikes again, which if it didn't close down last time, or in fact that you have to close it this time, even though it didn't again, why would it be strikes again? If you're talking, whatever, or maybe they're just claiming other things or accounting for that. So State Department says it's officially shutting down USAID. Again, would make that seem like it didn't happen the first time. But the point is that it didn't shut down again. And I just cite directly from a report on the memo. You guys, you could look up the memo from the State Department. And there's no one trying to hide this other than the people trying to frame it dishonestly. And it says the State Department will seek to retire USAID's independent operation immediately and assess whether to rehire some of the unknown number of the officials to, quote, assume the responsible administration of USAID's remaining life-saving and strategic aid programs. Now, read further. Guys, if you call, I went over it in depth in the show I'm pointing to. It says very clearly that this is not, they're simply, like we already told you before, moving it under the State Department. So you can argue that that's shutting down the independent operation. They're very clear about the same administration of USAID and the way it's applied, even using the same name, apparently, at this point, still, as far as I can tell, still, and yet we're still getting the same old report because that's what is advantageous for the partisanship. I said wrong or dishonest yet again, Alex. It's just more shell game. They are not shutting down USAID. They are simply repurposing it and moving it under the State Department. So in other words, admitting what it has always been and effectively giving it to a larger budget. Think about that. It's just simply being, I think the point is it's always been like that, and they just have numbers they show you. At the end of the day, it's just now become more of a black budget operation, which is what it's always really been. Here's the show. And I'm going to follow up in the next show, by the way, about the RFK blackmail kind of facade that's going around. And that's not to say he's not being blackmailed. It's this weird sidestep argument that didn't really have any backup, any evidence that we talked about in the show. And now they're even kind of doubling down on it with no evidence. It just seems like a really weird thing that's going on around that, and not unexpected, but just very odd timing anyway. But so then you get this follow-up the next day, and not Jerome Powell does the same thing. Trump did it. And then Wall Street Mav says USAID was officially shut down. And see, people look at this account with 1 million, whatever it is, 1.6 million, that as gospel, that's fact. Like we are the media now, right? This is enough. That's your source. Mav says on Twitter they shut it down. They didn't, though. It's infuriating. That's what I said. Incorrect, but no one cares. Oh, and so this is where the connection comes from. I just want to make sure you saw that again. That's the kind of misrepresentation you're getting. So this one shows this meme, almost upsettingly bastardizing the Giving Tree, which is a fantastic book. It says USAID on the tree, and then it shows this apple dropping saying condoms. And down here it says gay Mozambican squirrels. They're trying to be funny, which it is funny in its own right outside of the partisan game. And my point, though, is this is trying to say that that's what they're stopping. Okay. Well, here again, for the third, fourth time, is HIV response in Pwani, basically around Africa and specifically Tanzania. Now, that's just specifically AIDS, what do they call it? AIDS prevention, which is for $12 million. That's beginning of this month. Now, that begins to overlap with specifically increased coverage of services, including voluntary male circumcision. Now, this is specifically about AIDS prevention. I already talked about this. This is $14.5 million. Now, if you take the time to look into the Mozambique claim, what was it for? HIV prevention. That's what it was. Okay. So the same exact thing is being funded right now. Where are all the screaming conservatives going, you're lying? Or obviously, that's not going to happen. Here is another one. So now we're at what, $30 million? This is, and some of these started under his administration. Some of these overlap. This one is from the HHS. That's under RFK Jr. And it says, same thing, male circumcision. This one's for $15.6 million. Provision of voluntary male circumcision in South Africa. So there it is. So just, again, the people that are screaming I'm lying probably already knew I wasn't, but just either way, get it out there. Take credit for it. I don't care. Make a clip. Make a meme and tag me. I'll share it. The point is, this is ridiculously hypocritical for them to be making these huge claims, and Vance and every one of them use the same buzzword and Mozambique circumcision on every show they do. And they either know or don't know, which is almost, I don't know which is more alarming, that it's still happening. And that's my point, guys. This is not even about one thing or the other. It's about the narrative. It's about the outcome. It's about using a regime change engine or infiltrating governments or using it for Israel to do the same. And some places, those narratives still work, like in Africa. Why? Because they are dealing with HIV issues. And at least as the narrative goes. And the point is that is an easy way for them to work their way in under a guise of helping them. And in some cases, they provide things that people need. Doctors on the ground go, good. They're bringing what we need to help them. So it opens the door. Simple as that. But all the partisan screamers don't care. Now, let's talk about AI and XAI overlap. This is important because we already talked about this more than once. This is about the idea of the transition, the quiet transition from DARPA's XAI to Elon's XAI. We wrote this and did the show December 24th, 2024. So as you might have already seen on the 28th, it was reported Elon Musk says XAI has purchased Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. Or excuse me, that didn't sound right. X, formerly known as Twitter, for $33 billion. So he just basically, personally, I find that a bit weird. alone, it would be weird. If he was just a random guy who sold his own company to himself, it just seems like a weird way that I guarantee there's some kind of weird, money. I don't even know. I'm not trying to accuse anybody. I don't know. My point is that seems like a situation rife with potential for criminal activity. But the point is that he's also currently part of the government. And they're also currently working on an AI direction. Okay, so that's huge. It's rife with conflicts of interest. But again, it seems that his don't matter. No one seems to pretend that he has any potential issue, or even if he does, it doesn't matter, which all of that's false. The guy is literally one of the most powerful people in the current government administration, and we all know that, and yet we're ignoring the fact that he's being strung up by Israel or, puppeteered, or the fact that he has an unreal amount of conflicts of interest, and most of which we probably don't even know because he never had to apply, put out any ethics pledges like most of his administration right now. This is important, though, because let's not forget XAI was a DARPA program. The explainable AI, which the research on this ended months before he bought Twitter, and then a couple months later started XAI. I argue it already was going on. I argue he was already working on this. The point is, this is the same program. So that's first point, where you already watched the transition from yet another military government program through yet another military contractor rolled out as some helping program like Palantir from Total Information Awareness or many others. That's the way they repackage it for you, and it seems the right just can't stop getting it. They just can't take enough of these programs pretending they're fighting the left's Great Reset, right? But this is concerning for more than that. So obviously DARPA's military program about using AI and infiltrating your life is part of what's going on. But let's not forget they're using Twitter to train these AI models. That's been a public acknowledgement. So now, as he sells it over into XAI, rather say it's one and the same. So now, I would argue that there's a lot more potential issue, but I guess first and foremost, they've already been doing all of that. So the purchase is just kind of showing you what's already been happening. But it gets more alarming, of course, when you recognize that the AI direction is what this government is rolling out. And whether they want to point to OpenAI or XAI, I think they're all in the same direction, working on the same project. I think there's different parts of it. I think you can pretty much prove that when you all show all the overlaps right now with Palantir, XAI, OpenAI, while they pretend like they're all fighting each other. It doesn't make any sense. So the bigger issue is that for a fact that Twitter is completely infiltrated by Israeli startup intelligence entities like Authentics and CHEQ, who have been proving that every day. These aren't hypotheticals. You can prove these things. And especially Authentics is completely on the record tapped into Israeli intelligence, and he's working with them to steal your biometrics on Twitter, or use them for verification, even though they don't need those right now for Twitter's verification. Certainly makes sense. So that should be definitely concerning with how much more we continue to see this. Now, he says right here that he sold it. Here's what he says this is what they wrote about it on the New York Times. Elon Musk said on Friday that he sold Twitter to his social media company to XAI, that a artificial intelligence startup he founded in 2023, in an unusual arrangement that may raise conflict of interest questions. It's obvious. But he says XAI and X's future are intertwined. Today, we officially take the step to combine the data, models, compute, distribution, and talent. Now, I'm willing to bet you that this has always been the case. This is just them revealing it to you. That's my opinion. Mr. Musk wrote in the Post, the combined company will deliver smarter, more meaningful experiences to billions of people while staying true to our core mission of seeking truth and advancing knowledge. Is that the core mission of XAI? Is it the core mission of Twitter? I guess that would be nice to hear if that was the truth. I think we all know it's not the truth, but doesn't that seem like a weird mission for a social media company? Shouldn't the mission be to allow you to speak what you want in a free speech platform, even though it's not what it is? Or about an AI company? Should the AI company be seeking truth and advancing knowledge? That makes more sense. But this is a function. It's a computation. I think it's weird for them to be putting this intent on top of things that either on one side should be what you want to put out there, and the other side being something that should not have intent involved at all. But I think it's about framing it to you as the good thing, fighting for good reasons, always. Because right now, people buy it because they want to. Either way, combining these things there's a lot of personal information that's being overlapped here in a lot of pretty alarming ways. Let's not forget that XAI is involved with a lot of international interests. Huge moneyed interests that have no concern whatsoever for your free speech, for your privacy. This administration has made that clear. Your privacy in regard to again, let's not forget, they're using government models right now. $1 trillion databases to train their model. That has now come out to train this model. So my point is that even this administration, they said your privacy was basically an afterthought. It goes on to say the two Musk companies already share significant resources. The artificial intelligence models of XAI are trained on data posted on Twitter. Now, posted or everything on there? I think it's pretty obvious if they're using personal data behind the scenes from the government with no real allowance, that they probably are doing the same on their company. But it says last month, bankers told Twitter investors that some of the social media's revenue came from XAI. Yeah, so behind the scenes, it's already been overlapping. So this is, I think, a shell game. But so just so you see that, the combination of the two, I find that concerning. Maybe you don't. But here's an interesting overlap. Grok reveals, so his AI bot says, Musk has, quote, been trying to tweak my responses after AI bot repeatedly labels him a top misinformation spreader. This is from a couple days ago. You can't really, you can't disregard that. So if Grok is going, Elon's trying to change what I'm saying, then I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. Or I guess the argument would be that he made it say that, which wouldn't make much sense. Kind of easy to see. Is anybody confused by that? Is that shocking to anybody? Even the people that are trying to pretend he's not doing that, you all kind of know that's what we've already seen examples of him kind of have meltdowns and tantrums and do things that you all know he's not supposed to do, that you all claim he's not doing. So this is just insane. So now we're rolling into a massive AI direction where he's actively trying to manipulate the outcome of the data from his truth-seeking, knowledge-based thing. I guess truth-seeking knowledge than the way he wants it to be presented. Here's another example. Elon Musk, quote, pressured Reddit CEO to remove Doge posts. Not the same conversation, but just to get the sense of where these people are, their minds are at. How can you possibly frame yourself as a free speech hero while everything you do seems to be trying to tailor the content to how you want it to be seen and trying to get people not to do? It speaks for itself. You're either honest and you could acknowledge this, or you're trying to hide from it because you're not. Nothing is ever that binary. There's always nuance, but that seems to be the majority of the conversation for me. Again, you have to be aware of how concerning this is with the Great Reset overlap, with the technocracy, everything. You name it what you want. The direction they've been going forever in regard to DARPA, even just take it from the health side of it. The mRNA injection, the internal nano, what they call it, the internal nano platforms. These are all direct state terms that we've covered on this platform from DARPA. Whitney wrote an article about this before the COVID-19 explosion, or right in the beginning, about all the dark secrets. Actually, that's like what it's called. I wasn't sure if I remember the title. It's entitled Coronavirus Gives a Boost to DARPA's Darkest Agendas. And so I mentioned it, like in vivo nano platforms. Remember, this is basically the mRNA platform, but they designed it in your body. That's the point. I argue that may be what in fact already happened, and we just weren't told that. Either way, a lot of these things, the living foundries. I'm not going to go into it now because I'll read this and I'll dive into it. It's fascinating and horrifying at the same time. But this is, next generation non-surgical neurotechnology. We've referenced, what's his name, many times. Open discussions well past COVID-19 timeframe. In fact, James Giordano, I think his name was, he's an expert for the government. And he openly said on the record that he thinks the government did these things during COVID-19. It's insane. So I'll include that too. So the point there is just to consider that what they're doing is rolled into something much more alarming, right? It's not just the background research. They're literally rolling, just like they did with total information awareness, another program into your face that overlaps with all of it. Don't forget, Elon Musk is telling you that they want you to do AI doctors, right? You know who else is telling you that? Bill Gates. Right now, at the same exact time, both of them are telling you that's your future. Weird how the conspiracy theorists of the crowd don't seem to worry about that, even though we were just screaming Bill Gates should be arrested like 30 seconds ago, and now he's part of the Unity team. Now, this is another overlap, of course, and this is where you bring in Grok and Palantir. Palantir being total information awareness. So you see the connection. This says Palantir has brought Grok to the enterprise. Now officially available in AIP. And Elon Musk says, cool. Oh, great. So now Palantir has intertwined itself with Grok, which already was the case, and XAI, and through that X, and through that Elon Musk. But let's not forget, it's already been that way. So do you think this is a shift, or is this simply them revealing, pulling the curtain back, and what we've all been telling you is there? Interesting to think about, right? Either way, Palantir overlap with exactly what we've always been highlighting. This is one blob right now. That's concerning as hell to me. And cool, he says. And this guy even says, no, it's not, nor are Palantir cool. I don't think half the people he supports or that support him agree with most of what's happening. They just choose to pretend there's an excuse for it. And here's Martin Gack simply highlighting, it's an article in Germany, saying apparently Germany is trying to hand over the keys to police data, sound familiar, and information to Trump's master, he calls it, Peter Thiel, the architect and owner of much of Israel's genocide machine. This is real. It's happening. And so the point here under the article titled, anyone who buys software from Peter Thiel really doesn't understand anything. And it's all the things you already know. Read the article. They're basically saying what we know about this. This is concerning. These people are tapped into some of the worst things in the world proudly. And now that's overlapped with Grok. It's brought it into the fold. Twitter is basically DARPA. Just technocracy. And this is the guy that's tapped into Trump's administration from the top. And this is Derek just did a great article going over the acolytes throughout the administration. Meet the acolytes in Donald Trump's second administration. I'll also include for you the follow-up, which was about the ideology that they all seem to espouse, which is from Curtis Yarvin. But the point, guys, is this is very clear who is guiding this bus. Just like it was very clear that Citibank largely was a backing of, but I think it's bigger than that at the time. But the point is of Obama, or, you can go forward and see this. Israel and Palantir seem to be central in this conversation today. And I think that's representative of everything we're seeing. You think that's just a coincidence that they're the biggest two conversations on the planet? No, it's not because they're just behind Trump. It's because of what they're doing elsewhere. And it just so happens that those two things are like the primary representation behind Trump. Well, it's worth thinking about, isn't it? But I agree. Anyone who buys software or works overlapping with them and allows them access to your information doesn't understand anything or doesn't care to. And his point about the genocide, we'll play this yet again, it should be very concerning to you that we know that as to Israeli media, that Israel's using AI to murder people on the ground. This one's called the AI machine directing Israel's bombing spree, Lavender. This one's called a mass assassination factory, which is a direct quote from an IDF member reporting to them what's going on. And of course, when asked about that, here was his response.
What do you think about the use of artificial intelligence, or Lavender, by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets? And secondly, do you agree with Elon Musk about that the population decline is a risk for humanity?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel because my bias is to defer to Israel. It's not for us to second guess everything, and I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do, and that they're broadly in the right, and that's sort of the perspective I come back to. And if I fall into the trap of arguing you on every detailed point, I would actually be conceding the broader issue that the Middle East should be micromanaged from Cambridge, and I think that's just simply absurd. And so I'm not going to concede that point. And what was the other?
Now, I wish I had the better quality because how much he's sweating is also very relevant. But, just for an mental experiment, watch that again, and every time he says Israel, insert Nazi Germany, and see how that fleshes out. Now, see, if immediately you go, that's not the same thing. Well, yes, in principle it is. Doesn't matter, because so he believes they're doing the right thing. Well, plenty of people felt that way about any terrible thing that happened in the world, whether because they're also disgusting or they have an interest in it, whatever it is. There are people that would argue that was, I defer to them. And what were they saying? Well, we're in the right because this is a problem. Okay. So deferring to the people involved is willful ignorance, or you're part of the problem. And even if they're doing the right thing, you are simply allowing them to make the narrative for what you want to have. You know why that's happening, guys. It's transparent. Now, this shout out to what is it, Swampy Uniparty. I'm going to follow up. This is Ian Carroll's kind of follow up. All right, this was no, never mind. This is not the follow up. This is the first one about the black. I'm not going to get into today. This person shared it underneath that. I was going to include it today. That's why I had it up there first, but we'll come back to it in another show. I just want you guys to see the follow up in his conversation, which seems really fishy to me. But Swamp says, everyone who I've come to respect in the political sphere has ended up being a traitor, or at least seems like they are. Where are all the good guys? Sadly, it feels that way sometimes. And he highlights this, which I think is important. And this is actually a shout out to him, is where I got the article. I just simply searched for this headline or the phrase, and it says AI and XAI, or rather XAI and X are intertwined, like we read. And he goes on to say, Palantir, funded by CIA and Peter Thiel, which is actually on the record, by the way, guys, it's not even a secret, integrated with Grok earlier this year. We've been warned this is a Trojan horse. Interesting. And we just showed you that, guys. That's what's happening. And it says the plan has been to merge state and corporate powers to create a surveillance techno-state. They're like salivating about this. Many of them are publicly telling you. I mean, Andreessen just said this on Joe Rogan, guys, that we need that. It says, and Elon Musk will be techno king. He said that about himself. Not a joke. Now it says, let's not forget Larry Ellison and Project Stargate. His company was also funded by the CIA. Also very easy to prove. I don't fully understand the plan. He goes, but I'm starting to see the dots connecting, get slightly concerned. And then he rightly says, as time goes on, Whitney Webb seems to be right about everything. Indeed. Now, really, guys, you need to understand how concerning it is that this all the things that we are highlighting for you as possible, like almost like future steps, or rather what we think is there. Now, there's curtains are pulling back. And in some cases, framing it as a new thing, even though you can prove it's always been there. And that's kind of what we see everywhere right now. So this is important to understand. And of course, with the overlap of the Stargate Oracle discussion. Now, I'm going to, in a upcoming, probably tomorrow, I can't guarantee tomorrow based on some of the prep for the thing, for the Carnival. The point is that there's an Oracle story. I might be able to just grab it real quick and show you. Yeah, here we go. I think it was Orwell that shared this with me. Well, I'll follow up on this in more detail. But this is the same kind of point right now. Is that Oracle apparently also had a major data breach right alongside Twitter, which tells you something. That just recently we had that whole thing with Twitter. And it turns out they completely covered up that they did have a breach. Now think about that, guys, in the context of, make sure I didn't include it and forget, in the context of Stargate, right? So we literally have Oracle using, Ellison using, as he told you, the data they scooped from you during COVID-19, using Oracle, that they swore wouldn't be used like this, and they just got a huge data hack. Think about how wild that is. Now, the question is, was it actually a hack? So first point is that happening is a big deal. With this much overlap, this much influence, this much infiltration into personal databases. On top of that, we know what else is happening in the larger, technocratic Great Reset building. But the bigger stepping back point is, was this even an accident? Was this more about trying to normalize the idea that we don't really need privacy anymore? Now, that's just a thought. Not to say that that's any data point that's pointing that direction other than their past actions. But very worth considering, right? Because I think there's a very clear effort right now building in a direction that maybe just by accidental default, well, here we are now, so you see what I'm saying? And I think that's usually how this goes. Now Hacker has it up for sale, even though Oracle tried to hide the fact that they were compromised. And then, coming to today, 200, it's funny. I'm actually thinking right now, I didn't even stop and think today. I mean, I always do my due diligence. I would never just report on a headline without doing it, but it's like, I wonder if there's anybody out there doing some elaborate April Fool's. I always forget about that. I honestly think it's one of the most irritating holidays that's out there. It's Steve's birthday today. It's not April Fool's. It's just because people play some of the most nasty. I mean, on a funny, I guess it's not funny, on a side note, when I was in school, a friend of mine that I played sports with did one of the worst jokes I've ever seen in my life. He literally convinced, there's somebody who knew was homesick, and he convinced everybody at school that he had died that day. Legitimately. And it was like, people were crying, and this guy, he's kind of a bad person. But, think how crazy that is. And he was like, just kidding, April Fools. And like, nobody laughed. That's horrible. So probably one of the reasons I think it's a bad holiday. It's just insane. But back to the point. Forbes reports, as of today, 200 million Twitter user records released. 2.8 billion Twitter IDs leaked. Yep. Elon Musk's social media platform, Twitter, is no stranger to the news. It says, with the reported purchase of Twitter we just talked about, and it says, now another shock awaits the users of what will be Twitter. A self-proclaimed data enthusiast, that's what he's calling himself, just gave away what is claimed to be a database containing details of some 200 million Twitter user records. So again, is that because they oopsie, we lost it. I mean, if that's the case, that's irrelevant in its own right. Why are we trusting these people with this much information who don't seem to care at all, and even more so can't even protect it if they want to? But on top of that, I think there's another question to ask, whether there's a weird kind of normalcy happening here, whether like driving to that, to where, it's not necessary. There's an issue with that. I mean, even Elon Musk made a big statement about de-anonymizing people for the platform, right? It's interesting to think about. Now, you can read more about this. The guy is basically saying, no, I'm not. I mean, he goes, I'm a data enthusiast, not really a hacker. I'm just trying to show the truth. But he did release personal information. So it's kind of, you can decide for yourself. Now, I want to start with this on this segment again, because it's important to set the tone, because it's frustrating that we have to fight against either, intentionally misinformed people. And I mean that from the side of people misinforming them. And I do believe it's very deliberate from the side of people invested in a certain narrative to defend a certain person. But I want to reiterate this. And I have an example that I think is more important, but this one first, just coming from a Scalia ruling from Reno versus Flores. And the point is, the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens, of course, to due process. And this is from a Republican judge, so that's why I think it's more relevant for some people. But it says it's well established in his ruling that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process. Okay, it shouldn't even be contentious. I don't even understand why. If you understand the Constitution being something that applies to anybody, that's how it was written. And there are specifics that apply only to American citizens, and that's notated that way. The reality, though, is the bigger picture is all the people are endowed by the Creator with inalienable right. This is the reality that people lean into when it suits their interest within the two-party illusion. But that's not. This is just the one I'll reiterate because I think it's the most impactful for people that want to push back that it's a left-leaning judge or whatever. And I am going to follow up on that important topic in one of the next few shows around the judge, the bribery of it, the aspect of how it works. We had a great conversation with Bruce Fine and Jeffrey on BitChute about that, because Fine being an expert in the topic. But I'm going to follow up more on it because I think it's an important and alarming conversation. There's obviously radically politically motivated people in every field in this country, guys. It does not change the fact that by pointing at that you can just then disregard everything else. We'll get to an overlap with the deportations. But this is important, but I want to include, first, again, just ask brave. Okay, do non-citizens have right to due process? And yes, non-citizens, including undocumented immigrants, another way to say that would be illegal aliens, have the right to due process under the U.S. Constitution. But I find this one to be a little more important for people that, I guess, believe that Twitter is more important, has the information. So here's Twitter, here's Grok for you. Do non-citizens have the right to due process? Yes. Non-citizens in the United States generally have the right to due process under the Constitution. The 5th and 14th Amendment, that's what we've been discussing, guarantee due process to, quote, all persons, not just citizens. Courts have consistently interpreted this to include non-citizens, whether they are legally present or not. So, first of all, that is the easily proven reality from the actual text. Then you've got the repeatedly held up idea from Supreme Court, including from Republican justices. I mean, I don't even know why we have to argue this, but I know why, because Vance and Trump and Noam and all the rest of them are screaming the false point. So you get a lot of uninformed people that go along with the power structure, even though they believe they're fighting the deep state. Now, it says, for example, the Supreme Court, in another case, it's Zadvidas versus Davis, 2001, affirmed that due process applies to aliens within U.S. jurisdiction, emphasizing that the government must follow fair procedures before depriving anyone of life, liberty, or property. Another very important ruling that explicitly highlights the problem today. So everything they're doing, you could argue, is legally correct, except they did not give people due process. And you see, that's what trips them up, because had they done that, then, oh my God, they'd have to actually prove that they're criminals. Now, why wouldn't they want to make that case? Why wouldn't they want to demonstrate? Look at all the gang members that Biden let in. Wouldn't that be important for you to highlight that and lean into what we believe in this country and show that they're criminals and make sure no, you see, they're not the good guy in the conversation, not Biden, not Trump. They're the ones that feign to be that and then do everything they can to hide the reality. It's like we say with foreign policy. If you give them cluster munitions to use because they used them first, well, then you're just as bad. That's Biden, that's Trump. It's the same conversation. If you wanted to profess to be, do what you profess you are, Well, then you would not do that. You would say they're using illegal weapons and we're showing the world how it's supposed to be done. No, but that's not who these people are. But also, again, the point to make is they know that that's what we want. That's why that's obvious that most people in this country are generally wanting good things out of this. And that's why they want you to think, it's always the same game. I believe most Americans are generally in the same direction when it comes to what really matters. And they just convince us that we hate each other. And then, of course, there's the rabidly uninformed and aggressive and just bad people out there that are being promoted in this administration, or rather just in this government on all sides of it. And, the left and the right difference, but it's the same kind of bad people with no real morals and principles and integrity. They seem to be having a boon today. But it says non-citizens accused of crimes, however, get the same procedural safeguards as citizens, like a fair trial and legal representation. The point is there's nuance, as we've highlighted. Again, if let's just say they blew up a building, right? And the evidence was presented and it was shown that they were criminals. They argue well, I guess that's even different. The point is that there's precedent, which this is the conversation to have, whether that should even be on the table. But in the past, where you have examples, you can always show this nuance. This is why no matter what the conversation, due process, always. And the moment they started going, well, national security, well, because terrorism, they are manipulating you. Even if that's true, why would it hurt to actually give due process for everybody and show that because they know they can abuse it? My point, though, is that you could argue precedent, and that's why they're trying to claim everything's a terrorist, because that's how they can show previous precedent. I would still argue you go back as far as you want that this is undermining the Constitution. But regardless, the point is, regardless of any of that, it says non-citizens accused of crimes still applies, regardless of the nuance. That's the one that really matters. So just because they scream national security, it doesn't change the point that they should still present the evidence and they should still claim that they're, show and prove that they are criminals. If they're not doing that, that should make you wonder whether they have evidence at all. Now, it says there's debate around this, especially with undocumented immigrants or during national security situations, whatever that abstract term means, where some argue for exceptions. Okay, here's the important part from Grok. That's where we are, right? And this is what I always say, whether you want free speech or limited speech, the point is those are being discussed right now. Just the pushback does not suddenly make it not reality. So they're saying, yes, we are arguing for exceptions, but legally, the principle stands. If you're on U.S. soil, citizenship isn't a prerequisite for basic due process, or isn't a prerequisite for due process, meaning you get due process regardless. I hope that rings true with people that need to hear that right now, especially because it came from Grok, if that means any more to you. Now, I want to talk about the rest of the show. This is where I guess the end part's going to be some overlap with some Israel connection, because it's very obvious this is being done for Israel. That's not even debatable. They're openly telling you it's about criticizing Israel. So that shouldn't even be a debate. And that's incredible, because that's ideological control. That is not what this country pretends it is. That's censorship. That's, everything you could point to, guys. That is the undermining of numerous constitutional rights because Israel. Weird, exactly what we told you would happen. Why? Well, because Trump literally said so over and over and over, over and over and over. But no, I guess nobody wanted to listen. Now, again, I'm being facetious. I know plenty of you were. My point is that a lot of the people in powerful and influential social media positions, they saw a lot of money coming in, or they were always a Zionist. You can decide for yourself. Don't assume, but consider. Now, Mediate writes, that's horrific. Joe Rogan sounds the alarm on Trump possibly deporting innocent people. This kills me. Okay, this was yesterday. So here's the thing. You can, if I was telling you this a week and a half ago, because the evidence was there, and I'm going to show you the guy who really is doing a bulk of the work here. Oh, that's too far. This guy. And I'm going to play a great clip from him. Despite people already trying to frame it as left and right. At least he says it's a nonpartisan group. I guarantee they all have partisanship. The point is, regardless of that, what he shows you is easily proven. And he's doing a great job. And we'll come back to it. He's breaking down. This is the guy I already showed you from before, showing you the affidavit presented to court, showing you this guy already had asylum, and now it's been admitted. So before that, though, everyone was calling you a racist, Muslim supporter, terrorist. Oh, oopsie, I guess it was. So we'll stop saying that? No, they keep saying it, even though it's true that he was here legally and was deported without a criminal record. That was the first one. And now we've got a waterfall because it seems this was pretty flimsy. I argue because they didn't even have the evidence for, really any of them. I think it's about, as I think it was Jeffrey or Bruce, the point is just getting the numbers. Because they have a quota to me. They're telling you that. We plan to get rid of this many, I think he said 100,000 And now I guess they're just trying to reach that. But again, you could decide why. The point is this is happening. And so as they sit here yesterday going, alarmed that it might have been happening. This is what frustrates people like me. When we can prove it, that it's out there. And yet, Ryan over here with his home studio talking about his computer. But no, the entire media apparatus and all the mainstream alternative media with billions in funding across the board can't seem to piece that together, or are they all lying to you? It's both, though. The point is, we know for a fact that there have been innocent, legally present people deported. Period. Well before yesterday, and they're debating about whether, and it kills me, but at least they're doing that. But here's the point. I think they're doing this to let steam out. To one, make it seem like it's abstract. It's not for sure. We don't know. That's trying to water down what they know is already getting out. You could decide that these are my opinions on the intention. Regardless, this is what's being discussed. And so even the right side of the conversation, well, wherever you want to place Rogan, the point is, I think that's why this is happening from all of it, not left or right, but he plays that role, is trying to kind of, release a little bit of it. Like, it's kind of happening because it's already out, but in a way to kind of bury it. And overall, we now know many of them are there. If not, for this point, I actually haven't seen any single one of them proven to actually be part of any of these things. I find it hard to believe that none of them would be. I don't even know why I would say that. I guess the reason I would say that is because I can't believe that they would do all of this with literally no evidence for any of them. But I guess that's where we are. It's certainly possible. But I'd like to see even one of them proven to actually be a gang member. Wouldn't that be nice? But here's what it says. And this is an interview he had with, what's his name? Constantine Keeson. Somebody, they're all, I don't have a high opinion of it, but it says, and there's probably still people coming through that they're criminals. This is Joe Rogan. This is Joe Rogan praising the Trump administration for bringing down the number of migrants crossing the border illegally. I guess. What? So is it the idea that to scare people that you're going to end up in a prison, whether you're guilty or not, because let's realize that whether this is kind of a point from before, just a second ago. If we have a law in the books that says you can come into this country and present yourself to the border crossing, which is what a lot of people are doing, and declaring for asylum, because Venezuela being a clear point overlap, we'll kind of get to in a second. That people are going, look, our country's destroyed. I can't feed my family. I can't find a job. Now, that's because of what the U.S. did. And they proudly did that. They made it clear. We were doing okay. Even if you disagree, even if you think it's Maduro, it's the same point. The reality is that they fled either because their government was bad or our government created the situation, which is the clear truth. But either way, the point is that's why that exists. So they come here and they go, the whole claim, right? They come here for freedom and liberty, even though it's not true today. The point is they come and they clear asylum. And then some of them get it. But the point is, in that process, many of them were scooped up and took away. And it's not like they snuck under a fence somewhere. Yes, that does exist. But many of those people that are trying to go through the process, the legal process. And so they're all claiming they're all illegal because that's the easy way to get a bunch of rabid, uneducated people out there screaming about people they hate. Even though many of them are going for exactly what you always profess is to, this is the dream. Except when you have the wrong color or you're at the wrong moment in time or Trump says otherwise or whatever. It's disgusting. On the other side of the coin, in case you confuse this as a partisan point, you've got the Biden side of this, or rather just the left illusion of the full government picture, who then do the exact opposite thing, right? Allow more chaos to come in. Actually, this guy right here actually makes a good point about this. And that then creates the counterbalance, guys. Neither of them had it's all about manufacturing consent. And at the same time, there's lies about both of them when you really dig into it. But he goes on. So basically, Rogan saying, brought down the people coming in illegally. Now, look, I don't know. The government can lie about anything. Do we know that's actually the case? I wouldn't dispute it. That's probably the most logical thing. But do we know that? Did Rogan verify that? Or did he just look at the government website? It's a question to ask, guys, because I think we know they lie all the time. It's not one side or the other. The government lies. Even Doge is getting caught lying every day. So I just think it's important. Do we know they've actually brought it down, or is that what Vance said on TV, right? But it says, but the thing is, you got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, lassoed up and deported and sent to El Salvador prisons. Like that kind of SHIT, because I read some story, Rogan said. Was it Glenn Greenwald? Yes, because Glenn has been screaming about this just as long as I have, because he's a lawyer. He's an expert in the field of constitutional rights. He's a lawyer on that topic. And he knows this was wrong from the beginning, not because of one political leaning or the other, but because even if they were the worst terrorists in the world, they have due process. Now it says and this guy goes, the gay barber guy, it's scary. Now what's crazy about it is that there's one of many he could have been referring to. And at this moment, you can prove that they were illegally deported. We'll go over these tweets he shares. Now it says, is that true? Is that story accurate? Rogan replied. And he goes, I don't think we know. Well done, guys. Well done. Way to water down the story that we could prove a week ago. But it's not about the barber, but somebody. It says, can you explain the story for people who don't know what it's about? And by the way, this is why people, what's indie news and decentralized news, they make this point about, for example, Ian Carroll going on Joe Rogan and both of them understanding and aware of Whitney's work, but nobody ever trying to get it wrong, or any of us. Knowing that we've been ahead of these stories, like these major investigations, we don't know, we can't figure it out, or they don't want to. Not even to say that would be something I want or what she wants. The point is that it's interesting and telling to show you the information control that maybe he's not even aware of. Who knows? But the point is that it's clear. But he goes, well, from what I read, I think it was in Time Magazine, Jamie, or if you could pull it up, maybe we can get it accurate. Yeah, that'd be good. But basically, with a bunch of these Tren de Aragua guys, allegedly, they got at least one guy who wasn't a criminal, who was just a gay barber. I mean, imagine this, guys. I mean, it's insane to think this overlap makes sense to anybody, especially once we get more into the details. I will show you. But he goes, according to the story, came here legally. Yes. Now, what do you mean according to... So here's what's even crazier. So you're having this conversation after you read the article, okay? And Time Magazine, and you could read the information, it's sourced all over the place, is showing you he's here legally, and this is what happened. That's provable at this point. It was provable a while ago. And so even as they talk about it, even as he read the article with the source material, he's going, I don't know for sure. Which is fair to say we don't know. Maybe they could be lying to us. But you're framing it as if nobody knows, even though we do. He says, he was here legally. That's what they said. He goes, so do they have a green card? Rogan asked. He goes, I don't know what the details are. Maybe Jamie could find out. He goes, no criminal record? That is very clearly the case on both accounts. It says, from what I said in the story, now this is the problem, right? Because the mainstream media has been putting out so much SHIT that I don't know what to believe anymore, right? Joe Rogan goes, I feel the same way. You know what's funny about this, guys? Do you know who's putting out the information that they're referring to as the ones confusing them? The people that they support. This is insane to me. When you look at this, the media, which all the corporate media, mainstream alternative media, even the independent media, you shouldn't be blindly trusting any of these people. You should be questioning everybody, including ourselves, everything. But what's incredible to me is they're highlighting this. So the information they're putting out that they point to was corporate media. Most of the corporate media is rightly pointing out that who knows why? I can see it too. I think it's because that it's an agenda that's kind of the left, right, then that works for them to come out and say, no, they do process. This was legal. They should. Okay. So that's clearly not confusing them unless they're confused by the truth that's coming out through there. What they're pointing to as what's confusing them are the mainstream alternative media. All of them. And Trump and Vance and all the rest of them too. So it's just funny that they frame that as the corporate media, which, by the way, is also part of it almost always, but they can't seem to stand back and at least be honest about the fact that the people that are confusing them are the people that they are standing behind right now in every possible way. Then it goes on to say, well, if you think about it from a government perspective, and this is where I think it gets quite sinister, is once you've done that, the incentive structure is never going to be to admit that and deal with it. I agree. It says the incentive structure is to say nothing, to cover it up, to pretend it didn't happen, which is what they're doing. And it gets way crazier when you overlap this with the kind of propaganda stunts they keep doing. So I just want to start with that, this weird kind of abstract coverage. Now, on the 22nd of this month, we already talked about Trump could send Americans to El Salvador. That was what he said. And we were already past the Khalil story, not over with it, but that went from there to the Venezuelan point, the El Salvador point, then to the point to where he's saying, send those Tesla domestic terrorists to El Salvador, right? And they're here yesterday still battling in not sure about things that have been documented, released. That's why people are confused, because of people like you and what you're doing. Now, here is the State Department spokesperson, Tammy Bruce, blatantly lying about these people.
The secretary also addressed this a couple of times on the trip. He was asked about certain numbers of visas that were revoked. He said he didn't know, but that we'll revoke the visas of whoever it is that fits within the category of what it is we're deciding is going to get your visa revoked, which.
So again, as I pointed out last time, she kind of smirks when she says that because that's idiocy. That means whatever we decide is what ultimately is the reality. Typical government, right? No, there's laws in place that matter, guys, and that's really constitutional law. But all they're trying to pretend is that we can just argue that that's what the criteria makes, and if all of a sudden you're now fit what we just made up today, then suddenly you're a problem. Or the idea is that they change the metrics to meet the person they want to remove, which is exactly what we know is happening. But overall, none of it matters because it's all illegal, guys. None of these people broke the law. That's the lie she's pushing.
Which is illegal activity, essentially.
None of the people that I'm about to refer to, by the way, the ones she references, not in the entire picture. There are clearly people that were here illegally, and I imagine people that were actually part of these gangs, but that hasn't been proven yet.
I do know that from our own conversations here, that, here we go, the department, I can say this specifically, revokes visas every day in order to secure America's borders and keep our community safe, and will continue to do so.
Oh, sorry, I just said, and when they do that, they're legally required to give them due process and present the evidence that backs up the claim that they're using to deport them. They just leave that out. That is on the record and it's facts.
Because the process is ongoing, the number of revocations, as I've noted, is dynamic, and the department generally does not provide statistics on visa revocations.
All right. So the main point to focus on is that she's claiming that they all broke the law. And Aaron Reichland Melnick, who is the senior fellow at the, what was it again? The American Immigration Council, says, let's set the record straight. She met, and we've gone over two of them in here. Two of them we'll go over again more today. But Mohammed Khalil was not even charged with a crime, let alone committed a crime in the context of what they're highlighting. Ozturk, I believe it was a Brown doctoral student arrested on the side of the street with really no warrant presented, no identification, never committed a crime, was never charged with a crime. These are ideological deportations, guys. It's insane. Everything about that goes against what we pretend this country believes in. So here's just to quickly highlight the one we went over in the last show we did, which I already had it up here. The El Salvador deportations show goes over 4 or 5 of these. And we're going over new ones today. So keep the count running, guys. That's how crazy this is. But this is the Tufts International student, Ramaiza Ozturk. And the points clearly, legally here, did not break the law. The detention comes days after a pro-Israel group like Batar US, who got Khalil deported because they asked this one's Canary mission, said, get rid of her. Why? Because she's protested against Israel. That's it. There is no crime here. They're just going, that's terrorism. It's not. And even if you claim that, even if you want to pretend that you're supporting a terrorist group, as I've said many times, there's no crime being committed by being at a protest to support something. It's guys, think of it like this. Even the KKK has in many ways been termed a terrorist group in the past. And how many times the Supreme Court stood up for the right for them to have their protests? But it doesn't matter because they're trying to change what they're doing is finding ways to stop you from criticizing Israel. And in doing so, building a case to ignore your rights going forward. It's obvious. And it says reports have pointed to an op-ed we read in the last show where she simply calls on the university to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide. And you read the whole thing. It's measured, it's clear, it's fact-based, and not emotional, and not partisan, and not ideological, well, not a crime. Not saying we support Hamas or go kill anybody. They're simply saying this is a crime and we should divest from this because, just like every other one in the past, like South Africa and apartheid. Now it says glorifying and supporting terrorists who kill Americans as grounds for visa issuance to be terminated. Well, it's not, in fact. And the bottom line, though, is that they have to prove that if they're going to make that claim. They didn't do that. That's the same point across the board. If you want to claim they're supporting terrorists, well, first, the reason they can't do this is because they know that most of these judges are going to go, what are we talking about? Did they send weapons to Hamas? Did they even say the word Hamas? No, they said Palestine. Okay, so that is, from a legal, fact-based perspective, unless they're radically motivated, which a lot of them are, is not something you can make the case about. I mean, that's the same as saying you support Germany, therefore you're a Nazi. Even during that time frame, would not be the same thing. It's incredible that they are always trying to do this. But they didn't even try because I think they know they wouldn't be able to because there is no evidence because they didn't break the law. Now, Mohammed Khalil was an important shift in all of this. And remember, they had people that committed violence at these protests, and they could have gone after them, but they didn't. They wanted to go after somebody who was publicly known, who was prominent, who was well-spoken, who articulated well about the genocide. And this is what Israel wanted. They asked for it over and over. The Batar U.S. group was a proud Zionist, Israeli-connected group that is all over this country, that's been giving pagers to people. And then you see Netanyahu give a pager to people as a what's his name? The big lumbering tall idiot guy in our Congress. Basically gave him a silver pager as a positive thing. So you don't think there's a connection there? The reality is clearly that these people are promoting this, and they proudly said, we're making lists for the government to deport. I've been talking about it for weeks. And they said, Khalil to Bondi, to Rubio, to Trump. And then the one person they go after first is Khalil. And didn't commit a crime. Nothing what they said was true. And nothing doesn't even matter. He's gone. It doesn't matter. That's where we are. And if you think for 1 second that's in the interest of the United States, or because that's what the U.S. wants, or even what anybody but Israel wants, you're not paying attention. Why would you think this would be in the interest of the United States or the Trump administration? Think about it for a second. Why would it benefit them to get rid of a person who had no criminal record, who was not breaking the law, and in fact was very clearly acting, even if you disagree with him, within his constitutional rights? Doesn't that seem like a dangerous and stupid move for somebody pretending to fight for the Constitution? Yes, even if you agree with it. So think about that for a second and ask yourself, as always, who benefits? Now, Cornell student, protester, facing deportation, leaves the U.S. on his own terms. Now, this is interesting to me because what we're seeing here are people that are not breaking the law. People who are being forced out of the country. Like it says, a Cornell student, this is from today, facing deportation after his visa was simply revoked because of his campus activism. They're not even hiding this anymore, guys. These are people who are here legally, who have no criminal record, who are simply going to a protest, and they say, you're deported because we don't like what you're doing. I can't believe you even have people pretending to be like Republican or conservative or whatever, pretending to be believing in the Constitution or even fighting for liberty who can side with this. You are a hypocrite and a liar if you in any way are acting like this makes sense. At the very least, admit that you don't believe that constitutional rights should apply if they decide you're a terrorist. Be honest about it. Now, his name is Mamadou Tal, a citizen of United Kingdom and Gambia. He's asked a federal court to halt this detention, but he posted recently, this was yesterday, that he didn't believe a legal ruling in his favor would guarantee his safety or ability to speak out. Now think about how chilling that is. The whole argument is about freedom and liberty and free speech. And this is a person who hadn't even lost yet, who chose to deport himself because he didn't feel he'd be safe even if he got the right ruling. Now, let's not pretend that that's about the radical right attacking him. No, the government is what he's talking about. He is in this country, does not feel safe from persecution from the government. Doesn't that sound like what we talk about when we pretend that all these evil, Middle East countries are, they are doing everything that they've always pretended they were fighting. And in reality, they've been cultivating these things all over the world. Look at what has changed. So he left. He goes, I've lost faith. I have lost faith. I could walk the streets without being abducted. That's what I mean. He's talking about the government. Weighing up these options, I took the decision to leave on my own terms. It says the government said it revoked his student visa in March. Why? Because of his involvement in what they call disruptive events. Or protests. Disruptive protests. Did he break the law? No. Did he commit violence? No. So they just decide to make it about what they make it about. That should terrify everybody, guys. And this is not one case. If it was a one-off, you could argue there was a mistake. This is doubling down. What we know about the case of detained Georgetown professor Badar Khan-Suri. This one's interesting. A federal judge has blocked immigration officials from deporting a Georgetown University professor, a postdoctoral scholar who was detained by the Trump administration earlier. This was earlier, I think, like 18th, 19th of March, I think. The point, I said this before. Even though there's going to be people who just are motivated to support this because they feel boxed in, don't know what else to do. The point is, we were being told this was going to be criminals and rapists and right, the drain on society. Well, other than the people they are alluding or claiming are part of the gang, that nobody seemed to be proving, and now every day we find more of them that are not or who are innocent, so it's concerning as hell. It seems to be a bunch of people that are at Ivy League colleges, people going for doctorates, PhDs. The one unifying point, they all call out Israel. So is that what you think is a drain on this society? People that are trying to better themselves through higher education, people that have families and have been here for decades in some cases? Obviously not. Unless your real point is you just don't like people with certain skin colors and certain ideologies, which is obviously a huge part of this. But the point is the judge had blocked the officials from deporting him. Now it says, Roslyn, Virginia is his home where his wife and 3 young children are still living. His lawyers are still working to get him released, though he's currently detained, apparently indefinitely, with no charge because there's no crime, right? Welcome to the 2025 U.S. government, guys. That's where we are. You could be detained indefinitely. That's what he was just talking about. That's why he wanted to leave on his own, the other guy. Because this is like Israel now. You just get scooped up and you're held until they decide. And by the way, as even Derek has written about in the past, this is not the first time. Obama really kind of enshrined this in the NDAA, and Trump and the rest of them have all continued it. And that's for American citizens, mind you, let alone somebody. I mean, it applies the same way, stem constitutional rights. But he goes, Suri, the professor, Georgetown professor, is just the latest scholar in Trump administration has detained or tried to deport for their support of Palestinian rights or for criticizing Israel for the war in Gaza. Tricia McLaughlin, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, said on Twitter, Suri was a foreign exchange student at Georgetown University, actively, they claim, spreading Hamas propaganda and promoting anti-Semitism on social media. And you can look for yourself. What do they mean? I think you already know. End the Gaza war, you're committing genocide, and Israel's responsible. Those things become Hamas propaganda, anti-Semitism, and we all know that. They're not even trying to hide that. And neither of those things apply. Unless you want to conflate Zionism and Judaism or Israel itself with a religion. It's not the reality, guys. There's people in Israel, Orthodox Jewish groups in Israel, right now screaming with signs saying Zionism does not represent us. And I don't care if you think it's 1%. It still matters. It is not the full picture. And so you can't pretend that by saying the things that Jewish people in Israel are saying that you're suddenly a terrorist supporting Hamas. It's just insane. Suri has close connections, they claim, to a known or suspected terrorist. And I'll show you this in a second, who is a senior advisor to Hamas. That's their claim. Just like they're over here claiming all these lies about people that are not actually criminals, and it's going to get worse the more we go forward the next few tabs here. It becomes, you're a terrorist because we say so. And they're doubling down because they're committed, guys. Now, his lawyers deny this, but here's the point. Here he is. Badar Khan Suri. It says Suri's wife is a U.S. citizen of Palestinian descent, and her father is Ahmed Yusuf, a former advisor to Hamas, according to the Associated Press. Yusuf told the New York Times that his son-in-law wasn't involved in any political activism, including on behalf of Hamas. Yusuf, for his part, has criticized October 7th, the attack on Israel, and left his role in the Hamas-run government more than a decade ago. Okay, so unpacking it, if you haven't followed already, we're talking about his wife's father, okay, who a decade ago was in it, and not in a military sense, was working under Hamas, like everybody else was. Like, you have to understand how dumb this is. And I've made this point so many times. That, by the way, let me be clear, that does not then prove that he wasn't doing something wrong. My point, though, is you can't use just the virtue of the situation to claim that he was doing something wrong, because you can prove, let's not forget, by the way, Israel funded Hamas right up until October 7th. It's easily to prove. But the point is that after the forced, I think, manipulated selection process in 2006, because let's not pretend like they would allow, in my opinion, a group they were calling terrorists to be voted in and allowed to take power. It makes no sense. The point is that ultimately, everything in that area was then under the auspices of Hamas. Probably why they did that. You go and get a library card, it's going to say Hamas on it, guys. So going forward, everything everywhere has some remnants of that, and they go, yeah, you're all Hamas. Maybe. But you can see how easy it is to manipulate that. So even if you want to claim it was Hamas, and even if you want to claim he's in the front lines with a gun, which they're claiming was not the case, 10 years ago, and on October 7th, he called it out. So imagine now finding this connection and trying to claim he's going to be deported because he's supporting terrorism. I mean, this is probably the best connection I've seen in all this conversation, and that's flimsy as at best. And even if this guy was a terrorist, now he's guilty by association? This is why they're not presenting evidence, because this would not hold up in court. What crime did he commit? You can't just continue to say that this guy he is connected through his wife did things that he didn't even, you can't even prove that, but he just has his connection to Hamas. Well, by that very logic, nobody in Israel's government should be allowed in this country. They're all connected to Hamas. But you see, it's not about that. It's about going after people that support Palestine and call out Israel's crimes. Here, make sure I didn't just miss that. Yeah, okay, same one. Here is from Irish Star. Trump sends innocent man to El Salvador for having an autism awareness tattoo. Now, let's be clear about this. I'm going to go through the evidence, but there's many, and it seems more by the moment, guys, people being exposed, revealed to be legally in this country and having no criminal record. Not just one, but many of them. I mean, look, I would argue that one person being scooped up and sent to a concentration camp is enough, because all of the rest of them had their rights violated too. But it just is over the top for an American as well. But it really shouldn't matter in any context, because all of them had their rights violated. But now that we're seeing more and more and more, did this government really just send average people to concentration camps in El Salvador, which we'll get to in a second, because they support Palestine? That seems like what's happening here. But I'm not going to pretend I know for sure. All I do know is that these people, their rights were violated, and this is a dangerous, chilling step in the direction of authoritarianism. Now, the Trump administration unlawfully deported a Venezuelan man due to an autism awareness tattoo. This is not a joke. This has been verified and roundly discussed to the point where the White House is having to basically almost apologize. We'll get to that in a second, but not really. That's not how they roll, any of the U.S. government, but basically trying to admit it while walking it back and saying, well, but they're all bad people, even though they're not. Officials baselessly claim was a gang tattoo. Now, we're going to come back to this one again and show you some of these clips. I'll open and close it. Okay, right here. It's actually really sad. The nautical star, I think I know like 3 people that I grew up with that have 2 of those. And they claim that star alone is enough, with a couple of other metrics we'll come back to. But that's what they're talking about, a star that's like on the top of every tattoo shop. And look at the rest of them, guys. A gun, Michael Jordan. That's where we are. Coming back. On March 15th, Donald Trump authorized the illegal expulsion of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador and Honduras, despite a court order telling him to halt all operations until the accused receive a trial. See, they're over here screeching about something else. People that want to hide all of this to make it out to be politically motivated, and even if they are, doesn't change the fact that that is the most basic fundamental right concept. He's saying, don't you have to prove that they're criminals? Yes, they actually do. And they know that. That's why they tried to kind of organize this in a way that gave them the best cover. They know what they're doing. The problem here is that they're trying to make it out to be that he's going after him because he's attacking them, because he's a lefty. And a lot of very unintelligent people are falling for it because they hate certain things. They've been primed to react. You say Democrat, and they jump a certain high. What's the old saying? They jump how high kind of a thing, right? You yell Democrat, and they're like, where? You point me. Where am I going? Who am I attacking? All he's asking for is that they should receive a trial. Insisting every immigrant aboard the 3 aircrafts were dangerous gangsters of, remember, Tren de Aragua organization, Trump maintained his decision to disregard the order from the federal judge. The whole claim was that these were all Tren de Aragua. That was the push. We're going to come to another overlap where they're going, no, MS-13, though, even though that's not true. So they're grasping at straws right now. However, it says the sister of Neri Jose Alvaro Borges, a 24-year-old of Venezuelan descent, deported to El Salvador this month alongside alarmingly dangerous people, right? In a place that is rife with corruption. I mean, imagine being an average person who just got caught up in the wrong situation, and you have your head shaved, you're stripped naked, and you're forced to go to a concentration camp prison around people that are going to steal, beat you up, and rape you. And that, guys, this is not a secret. This is what is allowed to take place in this place. And now we're going to show you in a second people that they're going, well, we don't even know how to get them back, so too bad. God, I don't even know how to express how chilling this is. It really is pretty terrifying. Now it says family members. Let me make sure I didn't miss this. Oh yeah. So it says, however, the sister of Borges, Borges, I forget either way it's pronounced, a 24-year-old Venezuelan descent deported to El Salvador, said that relatives suspect that ICE used his tattoos. One showing the name of his autistic younger brother, another showing a rainbow-colored ribbon of the autism acceptance movement to justify his illegal ousting from the United States. Do you think that they confused a rainbow-colored autism sign for something else, or are they maybe just going after left-leaning people to support Palestine? I mean, I don't know. It just seems insane that would even be a mistake that we made. So it does not feel like a mistake to me. But it says, family members confirmed he was not a criminal. Now, of course, they could be lying, but you realize that if they wanted to prove these things, they could easily present the evidence, and they're not. I don't think it exists. And to be clear, most of these are being proven through their lawyers to be no criminal record and here legally. So, and again, the main point overarching continuously, they would get due process anyway. So that alone, whether criminals or not, is a major violation of the Constitution. Now, it says none of these tattoos has anything to do with the Tren de Aragua gang. But for them, immigration authorities, anyone with a tattoo is connected to Tren de Aragua, and that does appear to be one of these major points. We'll get to that in a second. Now, it says he had been a psychology student who dropped out of school to come to America 9 months ago. Why? Because of the upheaval of the Venezuelan economy, which has been a focal point of Rubio and Trump and the rest to destroy their economy because they didn't do what they were told. Not a secret. They were proudly doing everything they could to destroy that economy. Just like with Iran, it's what they do, which they know, as a matter of fact, hurts more than anybody, the lowest on the rung, the average people in the streets. So these people are struggling, even as he's going to school, couldn't get a job. And this is an easily proven reality. So they went to the country doing it, trying to get asylum, which happens often. It says many of us have come here because of the situation back in our country. There were times when we didn't even have food to eat or have enough money to buy anything. So they came here for a better life. Isn't that what we talk about? And then now he's in El Salvador. Who knows what's happening? Here is from today, The Independent. Trump admin accidentally sent Maryland father. These are all different stories, by the way. Maryland father to Salvadorian mega prison and says it can't get him back. Now, I'm realizing now I probably should have started with how horrifying this prison is, but we'll get to that in a second from Human Rights Watch and others. But this is the craziest one. Says now it can't get him back. In what world would that not be your top priority? If you're, we'll read through it first. It says, and that's Noam right there doing her little stunt where apparently she spent over $100,000 flying on her local budget. If you voted for her locally, doesn't that matter to you? To fly there and stand in front of a bunch of criminals and pretend like that's who you sent there, even though it's every day being proven that's not the case? Well, she did. They're all doing that. They're all rapists and torturers and now apparently human traffickers. And I'll show you why in a second they're using that one more than ever right now. Let's not forget, they completely deviated from human trafficking, child sexual abuse investigations to go after anti-Semitism, to go after protest people. This is public, guys. I'll show you yet again. That came from that's their data. It's amazing from the political side that is talking more than anybody in the world about, and in many cases rightly so, about sex trafficking. And then you voted and promises kept, and all of a sudden he removes that focus and goes after anti-Semitism. How in the world is anybody honest acting like that's a promise kept, or any of them, in fact? But the Trump administration accidentally sent a Salvadorian immigrant to a notorious Salvadorian prison and says it can't do anything to get him back. That's even though the man had protected immigration status, like all the ones we're talking about here, guys. Specifically, now this one's even crazier. So he was here legally in the country, and not on top of that, a judge had already ruled that you could not send him back to this country in particular, because this was in an ongoing back and forth where they're trying to, and it was ruled that he was allowed to stay. It says specifically barring him from being sent back to the country for fear of persecution, because this is an authoritarian country. That's why they support these groups, Israel and the United States, because they're all the same at this point. It says on Monday, in a filing in Maryland federal court, ICE admitted publicly to mistakenly sending him, which I don't believe is true, to El Salvador's notoriously brutal, they call it CCOT prison. On March 15th, quote, although ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador, Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error. So this is just disgusting. So not only are they going, oopsie, but now it's out of our hands, they're outwardly, in other contexts, trying to frame him as a criminal anyway, even though that does not appear to be the case by every piece of evidence we have. Down here, it says the Trump administration argues that because the man is no longer in U.S. custody, a U.S. court lacks jurisdiction. It's sort of like every other time. They go, whoops, we didn't hear, right? Where they didn't listen to the ruling, and then the Bukele sends a picture, and oopsie, they're making fun of you guys. They know they're choosing to ignore this. Or the other example, where she ran into the ICE and was going, we have the court order right here, in a different, not the same conversation. And they would not be seen. Nobody came to the front desk. He was ringing the bell. And then finally, oh, too late. He just left. Sorry. They know what they're doing. Now, why would they do that? Is it about the quota? Is it something else? It seems pretty alarming how clearly this is being used in a wildly deceptive way. So again, arguing, well, he's gone now. We don't know. It's not our fault. What is this? We're in kindergarten? You're damn right it's your fault. You just sent an innocent man to a concentration camp. How would that not be your fault? Somebody who was here in this country legally. Now, it says fleeing from gangs in his home country who allegedly stalked, assaulted, and threatened to kill and kidnap him as part of extortion efforts. That's where he came from, in El Salvador. That's where they sent him back. That's why the court ruled not to. But it says ICE accused him of being a member. This is how they tried to make it make sense. Accused him of being a member of a Salvadorian criminal gang, MS-13, even though everyone on these planes were under the umbrella of Tren de Aragua, right? Now they're just, I guess the narrative changed. Citing information that stemmed from a 2019 arrest with a group of men outside a Maryland Home Depot. The arrest resulted in no charges. Garcia's lawyers argue police deemed the man a gang member on weak evidence, which seems to be the running tally right now, including a claim from a confidential informant that Garcia was a member of MS-13 from the state he'd never lived in. And the fact that Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat at the time of his arrest. You see how flimsy this gets? So instead of the tattoo, they just go, oh, well, same thing, right? He's wearing not even Jordan, a Bulls hat. Because here's what's insane about that. 23 is what's supposed to connect to it. But he wears a Bulls hat, and Jordan was on the team in the past, so therefore that's connection. Do you think in any way this is, guys, how you even can pretend that somebody honest is going to make that flimsy connection? Are they just trying to scoop up people that are brown in the right place at the wrong time? Guys, I don't know how else you understand this. And I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about probably some of these people who are, like the judges, politically motivated. You know that exists in every field because that's what they're doing from both sides of the broken paradigm. But it says his attorneys maintain he has no criminal record, which you can prove, no ties to the gang or relation to any criminal group. And if they disagree, well, then you can easily present that evidence, which is what they keep saying from their podiums. And so we got plenty of evidence. Well, that's the same old tired mantra that they continue to give you about chemical attacks, about WMDs, about everything that later gets proven to be false, or everything they're doing in Israel. During the removal proceedings, Garcia applied for asylum. And this is the last time. And protection under the United Nations Convention Against Torture. Oh, no, excuse me. I'm thinking about the other one. So the point, regardless, the point is the past one was the guy who was here already in this, he given asylum. In this process, even the judge ruled that he wasn't allowed to go. This is not the plane turning back situation. And a judge granted him withholding from removal. The government did not appeal the decision. Okay, so legal standing. They didn't even push back. He's here legally now in the context of not being removed. To there. He's saying the Maryland man, a union sheet metal working apprentice and father to 5-year-old, remained in the U.S. and continued regular mandated check-ins with ICE, according to court documents. Quote, instead, the government put Mr. Garcia on a plane to El Salvador, seemingly without any pretense of a legal basis whatsoever. Once in El Salvador, that country's government immediately placed him into a torture center, one that the U.S. government is reportedly paying the government of El Salvador to operate. This grotesque display of power without law is abhorrent to our entire system of justice and must not be allowed to stand. Okay, So if you understand that there was this manufactured case against him when he doesn't have a criminal record and is here legally, becomes the argument for why they remove him, even though the judge already ruled that you can't send him there, they just scoop him up and send him anyway. And I mean, look, if you think he's breaking the law, then just use the law to remove him. But to send somebody who is not a criminal, who's even here legally to a prison like this in another country is absolutely insane. But on top of that, then putting him in a torture center that they're funding. This is not new. And let's not forget, this goes across multiple administrations. This is Trump and Biden high-fiving about the manipulation of your rights. It's the same thing they're doing everywhere. Same thing as the torture prisons they operate in Yemen with the UAE that both Biden and Trump utilized. It's not new, guys. Trump even brought on, what's her name? I'm blanking on her name off the top of my head, but the woman that was, I almost had it. The woman, she was basically the central character in like a torture conversation, and he brought her on anyway. And she said, well, I'm not going to do it this time. Sure. This is just horrifying. Now, it says the individual in question is a member of the brutal MS-13 gang, they're saying. That's their quote. We have intelligence reports that he is involved in human trafficking. I'll play that for you in a second. That's coming directly from the DHS. It says, whether he is in El Salvador or a detention facility in the U.S., he should be locked up. Well, you know what? Even if that's the truth, those are not the same thing. There's no equivalency there. You're talking about somebody who is here, so under our legal system, and has to be proven to be what you're claiming. You can't just go, we've decided he's a criminal, so wherever he is, it's okay. If that's the case, then prove the crime. And it says, and this is the whole, he should be locked up anyway, is the emotional argument you're getting from the rulership, and you get then regurgitated from the people that are mindlessly following along. It says, remarkable that the Atlantic and other MSM continue to do the bidding of these vicious gangs and ignore their victims. Excuse me. It says, on Wednesday, March 12th, Garcia learned his immigration status had changed, and he was sent to El Salvador by Saturday. CCOT is the same facility, dubbed, quote, a tropical gulag by some human rights groups, where the Trump administration sent hundreds of Venezuelans it alleges to be members of Tren de Aragua, or MS-13 if that falls apart, using emergency powers under the Wartime Alien Enemies Act to remove men without full court proceedings. Even then, that does not, in my opinion, from a constitutional standpoint, that does not apply. They're creating groundwork to just simply argue that if they decide, then your rights don't matter. You realize by principle, this applies to whoever they're pointing to. U.S. Americans, anybody, guys. It's the same principle, seeing as how you have rights either way. This should terrify everybody who knows, who has been saying, if you were scared of Obama or Clinton doing this, how do you not see this is the same damn thing just because you support the guy? It's the same thing. Multiple individuals who were among the hundreds removed from the country this month as part of the operation appear to have been deported for having tattoos with relatively common motifs, including an Air Jordan logo, a crown, a star, a rainbow autism awareness symbol. It says Secretary of State Rubio on Thursday conceded that the Venezuelans were not all necessarily members of Tren de Aragua, which is exactly the opposite of what they said first. Now, it says he called the group a combination of people whose presence, quote, is not productive to the United States and who were removable by law. Oh, wow. So now you're not productive in this country. You can just kick them out. I mean, nobody with a brain who understands even a fraction of the constitutional reality is agreeing with this. It's people who are politically motivated, exactly like they're using to go after these judges. He's wrong, by the way. And you know what? He knows he's wrong. Even if you are a criminal, you have due process. So you can't just, removable by law is not even, the point is, sure, if you prove their crime, and being not productive is not a crime. So all he's trying to do is pave over the fact that they just sent innocent people to a terrifying prison, and they don't even seem to care. It's disgusting, guys. These are really bad people. Now, Aaron Rechlin Melnick says it's J.D. Vance who did, starting here. J.D. Vance says this 31st. John Favreau says, any comment on this, Rubio, Vance, Elon Musk? You just admitted to accidentally sending an innocent father from Maryland to torture dungeons in El Salvador, and you refused to do anything about it. The Atlantic covered this. Here's what he says. Vance, My comment is that according to the court document you apparently didn't read, he is a convicted MS-13 gang member with no legal right to be here. My further comment is that it's gross to get fired up about gang members getting deported while ignoring citizens they victimize. Well, see, this is they're manipulating the low intelligence reader. People that are already in line with what they think and say. So the point is, how in the world are you going to just argue that who's even talking about the victims here? No one is saying that what happened is, if anything, because it's generalized. The point is, if there's people that are in criminal here, I'm sure in some cases they're victims. No one's denying that. In this context, by saying that you did not do the legal reality does not mean you're ignoring what if and when they had victims. He's trying to outrage you emotionally to ignore the facts. And even worse, he's wrong. He didn't read it, apparently, or he's doing this to try to manipulate people that he knows won't read it and will instead, in lieu of that, point to what he said as the facts. And that is what's happening. People, just look at the quote tweets, guys. 14 million views. Look at the quote tweets. People that are super influential with hundreds of thousands of followers are going, they didn't even read it. They are gang members. They proved it. Well, how about we actually look at the documents? As as Melnick says, J.D. Vance, who didn't read the filings. Again, we already went over this. From the Independent, the court documents are included, has no criminal record. In 2019, he was arrested but not charged. Now, that's the actual reality of that. You can argue he was still a criminal and they just didn't charge him, but if you're not charged, you have no criminal record. He was not charged, and it was for loitering outside a Home Depot. Despite him denying gang ties, the cops put down on a form that he was MS-13. That's it. So they simply are now pointing back to no charge, but they wrote that down, and that's what Vance is pointing to. So either he's that stupid or he's trying to deceive you. I find this alarming in every possible way. He says it's shocking that Vice President of the United States would so callously and so falsely accuse someone of being a convicted gang member. I mean, guys, they know they're locked in. What else are they going to do? Admit that they just sent some guy to a concentration camp illegally? I mean, they could be charged with a crime for that. They could be impeached at the very least. It says it's especially bad when his own administration just admitted to illegally deporting the person due to administrative error, right? They just said that, and his response is he's a terrorist or a criminal? Well, if he was a criminal, then it wouldn't be an error. But still, understand, regardless, there would still be the presentation of evidence that they're not doing across the board. It says, who's omitting relevant facts? I've repeatedly noted that claims... Oh, this is responding. I thought, this is the wrong one. Hold on. I'm going to go into his thread in a second. So here he's following up on this, where this is another person calling him out, saying Vance here, mocking Jon Favreau for not reading the court filing, says the deported man was a convicted gang member. The court filing, which is right here, does not say that. It says he was denied bond in 2019 over an informant's claim that he was MS-13. It's right on the document. You can read it for yourself. Here's the actual court document. You know, again, what you'll not get in all of the mainstream alternative media trying to convince you the opposite is true. Clear. Now, here is what Leavitt said, that Benny Johnson is proudly supporting because he supports whatever they point to. The point here, guys, is that she's putting down the lie. Now, let's to be clear, Leavitt is just a talking head. She's repeating what she was told. That's their job. But know that the Trump, Vance, whatever's pushing this on her, their administration is knowingly deceiving you with this conversation.
Error that you are referring to was a clerical error. It was an administrative.
So just to be clear, that's what we were just talking about. The error, the clerical error that they claim was an error around the guy who was not MS-13.
Administrative error. The administration maintains the position that this individual who was deported to El Salvador and will not be returning to our country was a member of the brutal and vicious MS-13 gang.
So then why would you talk about not getting him back? Like, it's too late now. I don't even know if we can get him back. Why would you even say that if you were convinced he was a criminal? You see, because that was the quick response they gave because they were on the spot. Now they've manufactured their narrative, guys. This is how they work. Even Rogan and them are openly discussing how they just won't admit it because that's what governments do. Yes, all sides of it. Think about how disgusting it is, how alarming it is that the government that's professing to be the one saving the world are literally doubling down on what they know was a crime. This is as bad as any other country they claim to be going after. if not worse.
That is fact number one. Fact number two, we also have credible intelligence proving that this individual was involved in human trafficking. And fact number three, this individual was a member, actually a leader of the brutal MS-13 gang, which this president has designated as a foreign terrorist organization. Fact number four is that foreign terrorists do not have legal protections in the United States of America anymore. And it is within the president's executive authority and power to deport these heinous individuals from American communities. It is a promise he campaigned on. It is a promise he is keeping. And every single person in this room should be grateful for that, considering especially MS-13 is very prevalent and prominent here in the District of Columbia, in Maryland.
Right. So it becomes the broad point. They're everywhere and it's bad. So why are you confused? Why are you mad about this? Well, because you just conflated the fact that they're not part of it. But again, there's main points here.
Fact number four is that foreign terrorists do not have legal protections in the United States of America anymore.
Wow, anymore. That's an interesting admission right there. Well, again, if you understand the inherent rights of the Constitution, anybody charged with the crime has due process. That's the reality. They've just changed that under, well, national security. Okay, so here's the reality. If they decide to call you a terrorist or label whatever group you're a part of as terrorist, then you can be removed. You could be arrested. You could be put in a dark cell for the rest of your life and never be thought of again. It's irrelevant whether you're an American or not. For that, you must understand that. You need to be scared of what they're doing here because they're creating the groundwork, which is unconstitutional, but they're creating a legal groundwork for why they can just deem with you what they want and get rid of you. If you don't understand that the principle applies whether or not you're American, you don't understand what's happening right here, guys. And if you just convince yourself that they wouldn't do that, well, you are fully lost because it's whether or not, I completely disagree with you, as we already saw him floated, but what happens when Democrats come into power in case that's what makes sense to you? How can you not think about that? Unless you're convincing yourself that somehow they'll never be in power again because that's what it's very clear how bad this is.
And it is within the president's executive authority and power to deport these heinous individuals from American communities. It is a promise he campaigned.
Right. So now they're all heinous now, even though everyone we're pointing to, you have not yet proven a single one of them were actually criminals, other than somebody who was here illegally, which does not then make them a criminal other than the idea that they are breaking the law by being here illegally. But realize within that category, we've already shown you at least 3 of them who were in the process of seeking asylum, which means they did not crawl under a fence. They walked up to it and they said, I'm here to seek asylum. So they're in that process. And yes, in that limbo, they're technically not citizens yet. Or rather, even here, but same point. It's all redundant, guys. There was one other thing in the beginning here, I think.
To number 2, we also have credible intelligence proving that this individual was involved in human trafficking. In fact, number 3, this individual was a member, actually a leader.
Now he's a leader of the gang. So it goes from being arrested, rather picked up, it's like the same thing, arrested but not charged or brought to jail for loitering at a Home Depot. That's it. No charge. It's over. And they write down MS-13, never been arrested again. And she has the nerve to say he's a leader. Now, look, guys, it's certainly possible. Anything's possible. You know how we'd find out? Yep, here we are again, by literally due process and proving your claims. Now, imagine how silly it would be right now for somebody out there pushing back on the idea of proving an allegation in this country in 2025. That's what they're doing. All the Benny Johnsons and Jones and all the rest out there clapping like a barking seal about how great it is that we're destroying this country.
In Maryland and in Virginia, and the president, the attorney general, everyone who has been involved in these operations is focused on eradicating these criminals and terrorists from our communities.
The vice president said he was a convicted member of MS-13. What evidence is there to back that up?
There's a lot of evidence, and the Department of Homeland Security and ICE have that evidence.
Okay, hold her to account, guys. Now, again, she's just a repeater, but probably knows she's lying, or man, who knows? But the point is, Vance and Trump and the rest, they know that there is nothing. They're right now hurriedly trying to manufacture something. There is not, what we have been presented, at the very least, does not show any of that. Now, if they have that, they could present it and change your mind, couldn't they? I'm willing to bet you that does not happen. Because as long as the guy's gone, all they need is time, guys. Here's a cat toy. Look over there. Ooh, another war. Ooh, a shooting over there. People will quickly forget. Hopefully not. I won't. I'm going to follow up on this. This is where we are. Of course, he says, Benny Johnson says, Caroline Leavitt shuts down fake news Atlantic story. You mean the facts that you were reported in the fake news story? Yeah. You mean the corporate media who lies all the time, who put this out, which was true, shuts down the story? I mean, ask yourself this, guys. Do you think Benny Johnson is not smart enough to be able to piece this together, to look through the documents and realize, oh, wait, he lied about that. Oh, wait, the evidence isn't there. Or do you think he's so dishonest it doesn't matter? I don't see another option. These people are going, yeah, get him. Deported the Maryland father, in quotes. Yeah, because he's a father and he's not a criminal. I mean, guys, these people are disgusting. Like, it's inherently gross to me that these people know what they're doing and are cheering on or not caring to look about people's lives because they told you so. You're a coward and a follower. As Derek Bro says, you're a mouthpiece for the establishment. The Trump admin provided no evidence for these claims in the courtroom or ever. So here, I think is where it's relevant to listen to what Melnick said in front of Congress. It's a 5-minute clip, but listen to this, guys. He's breaking down the evidence, which he sources. You can look through. I'm going to give you a lot of them coming up next, but look through his Twitter thread or his website. It's all documented information. And the reality, which I think is really important to this, is what we've been telling you. So here's Benny Johnson screaming about why this is so important and they did the right thing or whatever he's saying, even though 30 seconds ago they were all screaming about going after human trafficking, right? Well, he's going to make a huge case here while they basically depleted those investigations to go after people who are protesting legally in this country or anti-Semitism. I mean, look, if they literally came out and said, we're doing this because Israel said, the Benny Johnsons of the world would clap like a seal. I promise you that. These people are followers. And I'm going to end with a point about somebody like a Dave Smith, for example, who in the Iran conversation is at least showing you his line. Saying, look, if he does something with Iran, I will, for the rest of my life, apologize for voting for him. Like, good. At least people are showing that there is a principle that will go too far. Most of people in partisan left and right seem to have no line. They will choose to double down because that's their side. That is embarrassing to me. You're not an adult in the room if you were acting like that. And I think that's a huge part of the conversation. But I'm glad to see people like that who, in past conversations, I do think they do what they think is right, even if we disagree, who are now showing you that this is going too far. Whether it's support for Israel, whether it's continuing to bomb or continue the wars in Ukraine and Israel and God everywhere, it's clear that he is not following through, guys. This is just one part of that. Please pay attention to this. It's important.
Chairman Guest, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Aaron Reichland-Melnick, and I'm Senior Fellow at the American Immigration Council, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization which envisions a nation where immigrants are embraced, American communities are enriched, and justice prevails for all. There is no doubt that President Biden's record at the border was mixed. As we have argued, Biden made measurable progress at restoring the asylum system while failing to lead on a national level to respond to the unprecedented rise in migration.
I'm actually glad he said that, right? Because people are so quick to respond and reflexively push back on it for a partisan level. And really what he's highlighting is, yes, like Biden played a role in this, right? From the same problem in the other extreme. Allowing unfettered immigration that caused problems. I mean, again, my point, that's one part of a problem reaction solution, that they're now using the other side of it to effectively create what they already had planned to create. I think that's clear, but I think it's important to hear that.
True, the administration eventually settled on a strategy in 2024 that produced results, including a drop in border apprehensions of 80%. But the legality and long-term viability of this strategy was questionable, and it was ultimately too little too late. However, Joe Biden is no longer president. And while President Biden ordered DHS to focus on immigrants who are recent entrants or public safety threats, President Trump is focused on arresting and deporting all removable immigrants, including longtime residents, those with no criminal records, families, children, and undocumented workers. Trump has made immigration enforcement the top priority of federal law enforcement, above fentanyl trafficking, above terrorism, and even above protecting our children from predators.
But as long as they call them all terrorists, then you can combine the two categories, right?
This obsession with draconian immigration enforcement will make us all less safe. If continued over the next 4 years, it may also impoverish us as a climate of fear and large-scale removals cause the economy to shrink and Americans to lose their jobs. Over the last 2 months, the Trump administration has reassigned thousands of federal law enforcement officers away from their normal duties to instead carry out low-level civil immigration enforcement arrests and prosecutions, including against many people with no criminal record. This has diverted resources away from serious public safety threats. According to Reuters, at Homeland Security investigations, which over the last 2 years reported saving 3,000 children from predators, Scores of agents who specialize in child sexual exploitation have been reassigned to immigration enforcement. Rather than protecting kids, these special agents are staking out immigrant workers' homes and taking down license plates. At the Department of Justice, Attorney General Bondi declared on her first day that immigration enforcement is the top priority of the agency, above nearly everything else. Even the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force has been directed to assist in the execution of President Trump's immigration initiatives. But it doesn't stop there. 25% of the DEA's workforce has been reassigned to immigration enforcement. Rather than tracking down drug traffickers, DEA agents are combing through old files to find cases where prosecutors can add illegal entry or reentry charges years later.
Guys, how do you not see this? I mean, look, again, same point from before. How is this in America's interest? Like, if you think it's about getting rid of bad people, or like if you just think it's about getting rid of immigrants in general, why are we bringing in Afrikaners from South Africa? It's not the same conversation. At the end of the day, this is not what you guys were asking for. They're going after people that are adding to the society. Look, if you just want immigrants gone, then be honest about that and don't make it about criminals, because most of these people, if not all that I've seen, are not criminals. So they basically did a little bait and switch on you guys, where it's like, we're going after the rapists and terrorists and drug traffickers. And then in fact, they stop going after drug traffickers and go after random people who are, getting their doctoral at Brown, right? That's what's happening. It's at least in many cases. I think my point was, how is this in the interest of the United States? Especially since what you're doing is literally ignoring constitutional rights. It does, however, seem to be in the interest of one in particular entity, who in fact has been asking for these things to happen, who has been pointing to certain people to go after, and who is actively trying to shut down what they all are talking about. But totally isn't connected to that entity, right? Because that would be racist.
At the ATF, a full 80% of agents have been reassigned to immigration. Even the IRS isn't immune, with special agents trained in financial crimes being made to go after random immigrants instead. In a world of limited resources, diverting federal law enforcement to the mass deportation agenda will have an obvious effect. When HSI agents tracking online pedophiles are forced to stake out undocumented workers, our children are not safer. When DEA agents investigating drug rings are told to find immigrant families who missed court dates, our communities are not safer. And when FBI agents tracking terrorists are told to focus on immigration arrests instead, our nation is not safer. These concerns are not hypothetical. In 2018, under the zero tolerance policy, border prosecutors were ordered to charge all migrants with illegal entry. The result was clear. There was a large drop in drug trafficking cases brought by federal prosecutors, because prosecutors were spending night and day focused on migrant parents instead of going after the drug traffickers. This administration's priorities are backwards. While Trump is spending billions of dollars on detaining ever greater numbers of immigrants, his administration is slashing services for Americans. Money is pouring into the pockets of private prison companies at the same time as USDA is ending contracts, giving children access to fresh local food, and Social Security is closing offices nationwide. Rather than a single-minded focus on mass deportation, this administration and Congress should pursue common-sense policies that help American communities. We need a system that can resolve cases quickly while also maintaining fairness, due process, and meaningful accountability for all actors. That includes a path to permanent legal status for undocumented immigrants who have resided in this country for decades without breaking other laws. This would build American prosperity, encourage the rule of law, and break the power of unscrupulous employers who exploit workers. In an option between self-defeating mass deportations and a prosperity-building path to legal status, the choice is clear. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Now, the very last part, right, about people who are illegally here but have broken other laws, like that's a fair, like there's plenty of people that err on the side, which I would argue is probably the best way to go, that if you're breaking the law, then that's a crime, then charge people for the crime, right? I mean, that is reality, even though it might hurt certain people that aren't actually criminals. The point is, you have to err, like we keep talking about, err on the side of principle. So if that's the case and they're here illegally, then that's a crime, so be it. If you want that change, then we can discuss that. The point, though, is that outside of that one discussion about some people being caught up in that, the reality is even those people, as we keep repeating, and I will forever until this conversation is understood, have the right to due process if you're going to remove them anyway. That is what we understand. Every Supreme Court ruling, it's consistent, guys. The only pushback is that we should have exceptions because then let's have that conversation. In the meantime, stop illegally sending people to concentration camps because they speak out about Israel. But here's another example. What to know about Andre, 31-year-old makeup artist, falsely deported to El Salvador prison. This is from March 24th. It says, ICE wrongly detained Andre last year when he sought asylum over persecution for being gay and his opposition to President Maduro because immigration officials thought his tattoos linked him to Tren de Aragua. See, so this is not even new, guys. Before this, last year, he was already inappropriately connected to him because he had a tattoo, according to tweets and media appearances by his lawyer. Andre is among multiple migrants deported recently to El Salvador, whose attorneys and family members have said have no gang affiliation or even a criminal record, and took the appropriate legal steps to seek asylum. So that's the important part. They're in the process of getting asylum, or in many cases already given asylum. And nonetheless, that's ignored. So that's your government violating our own laws and constitutional rights in order to get rid of somebody because they don't support what they want them to support, or they are speaking out about things they don't want you speaking out about. The Trump administration claims it had the authority to deport the migrants it suspected of gang affiliation without court hearings under, of course, the Alien Enemies Act. That's why it was used. They think it gives them some legal groundwork to say we don't need to prove anything. It's simply not true. The reality is this is a slippery slope of declaring national security for whatever you want to get by with whatever you want. That's what they seem to be doing everywhere. Every single thing they're doing. They're trying to find some way to just bypass the check and balance of our system. And you may think that's the way to go. Maybe it's the only way. The bottom line is even what they're doing is clearly showing you they don't actually care about what they're claiming they're fighting for. What all this is doing is cementing the reality that they can do whatever they want if they just say the words. National security. But it says a decision in regard to using that without court hearings that was blocked by Judge Boasberg, who said it's not a valid claim. Now, you see why they're going after him so aggressively? Not because look, let's just say for sake of conversation, he is completely politically motivated. It's irrelevant because that's very clearly proven to be a reality, guys. That does not suddenly remove your constitutional rights. Do we all forget what the word inherent means? Inalienable? You can ask the right in every other conversation, and they'll triple down. Shall not be infringed unless Israel's involved. Now, it says Boasberg ruled Monday that the migrants were, quote, entitled to individualized hearings to determine whether the act applied at all. You see, even under these acts, the point is, okay, if that's the case, then you have to show us the evidence that makes that apply. They know what they're doing. Now, here is the guy we're talking about. Yeah, imagine sending this guy, a gay barber, to El Salvadorian prison for being a member of a gang. The guys, let's not pretend like they're making mistakes here. I don't know how we can frame this any other way. He says an ACLU filing sheds light on how Andre, the gay makeup artist, sent to rot to prison in El Salvador, ended up being labeled Tren de Aragua. Documents filed by ICE show that the only evidence, this is their documentation, ICE listed for membership was a tattoo of a crown with mom below it. So here is this is from the 30th. Another document filed by ACLU is the unclassified ICE document showing what it alleges are Tren de Aragua tattoos. Now, even if they were, understand, anybody could see these somewhere and get them. It doesn't prove because you have a tattoo that you're part of it. It's certainly an indication if you're investigating, but you see, that's not a crime to have a tattoo, guys. We're allowing them to go down this path because people support partisans. Now it says, but reverse image search simply shows that these were stolen from the internet and have nothing to do with Tren de Aragua. But and this continues. He says, make sure it wasn't, oh, there was, okay. Oh, and this is just about the individual ones. The Jumpman Imagine, Image, which was the New York Post claimed refers to 23, a specific point. That's my point from before. The 23 is what matters, a specific Venezuelan neighborhood. It's Michael Jordan's number, which is the point, was first posted on Twitter. But let's remember, guys, they just used the fact that the guy was wearing a Bulls hat, not even a Bulls hat. Because, well, Jordan's on the Bulls. And they're searching, they're reaching. Why would you do that? I mean, he just goes over each one of them. And the reality is, regardless, especially the nautical star tattoo, are you kidding me? Same point applies, all of them. But this one goes back 30th again and says ACLU obtained ICE's Alien Enemies Act validation guide. This is the important part. Confirming all it takes to be sent to rot in El Salvadorian prison is 1, having a tattoo an ICE officer says is gang related. Number 2, displaying, quote, logos or symbols or on clothes an ICE officer says are gang signs. That's it. So this is what the guy was talking about. Oh, I haven't played it. It's right here. Let's play this first. Glenn says, this is the same BS that drove the Bush-Cheney-Obama war on terror. Right, the left-right overlap, just like today. He says, why are you imprisoning and kidnapping people with no due process? Government, stop defending terrorists. They go, but how do you know they're terrorists? Absent hearing. Because we said they are. That's what happens. We watched this morning. Now, the volume's a little low on the side of the question asking. That's what they're asking. Our answer is very clear.
Guide the DHS is using to determine who is an enemy alien, a Tren de Aragua member, and deportable under the Enemy Aliens Act. It has criteria here that require 8 points to be classified as a TDA member. You can get classified by simply having certain symbols in your tattoos and wearing certain streetwear brands. That alone is enough to get someone classified as TDA and sent to El Salvador.
That's not true.
It is true. Now, the insane part is, I mean, she just has talking points that she's primed to say, okay? She's not actually, I mean, whether she's informed on it or not, her job is not to actually be informed. Her job is to repeat what she's told. That's a White House press secretary. The point is that you have the documents. Why? Because it's been released. The ICE put it's public information. You can read their documents that make it very clear. The point is 2 of those 8 points are enough to get you deported. It's undeniable. And so all she does is go, no, because people will listen to what she says and report that as the fact. Today, even in corporate media, it's insane. Even though you can look at the documents for yourself. Thanks, Twitter files, for undermining the idea of source material. I keep telling you that was relevant. Here's what she says in response.
To El Salvador.
That's not true, actually, Andrew.
According to this document, it is.
No.
A document released by ICE.
According to the Department of Homeland Security and the agents, have you talked to the agents who have been putting their lives on the line?
Okay, right. Because now, see, that was a little dig. So how dare you? They're putting their lives on the line. To what? Arrest people at a Harvard or I mean, the reality is clearly in some cases, yes. They're, again, assuming any of them were actually gang members, because let's realize none of them have been proven to be. I'm not disputing it, but there's no evidence, so we don't know. That's an honest stance. The point is putting your lives on the line. Everyone we've seen so far has been a gay barber, a doctoral student at Brown, a PhD student at Harvard. Yeah, those are you're in danger, right? Or what's her name? Ozturk. You've seen the video. This meek little woman being arrested, and you just kind of, they surround her and they kind of gently put handcuffs on her, like 7 of them, cover their faces. But see, they want you to respond emotionally and be like, yeah, they're threatened, they're putting their lives on the line for you. How dare you? Without thinking about the facts. Emotion will circumvent logic. That's why they do that.
Who have been putting their lives on the line to detain these foreign terrorists who have.
They're all foreign terrorists now. See how broad stroke that is? Foreign terrorists? Not a single one of these people have been proven to commit any crime relating to terrorism. Not a single one of them. None of them. At best, you have an affiliation to a gang you're claiming that no one has proven. Just because you label that terrorism does not mean that they have now committed terrorism. You realize how insane that is? Like, even if they're actually part of a gang you've labeled terrorists, show me where they've committed terrorism. So now we're just jumping over everything to say they're acting in terrorist acts. These are desperate people, guys. I don't know how else to see this. I mean, I guess I see it as desperate because this is wildly obvious. Maybe it's just that they don't care. I mean, we talked about this morning a little bit. I get the impression these people are concerned about the increasing awareness of the average people. But even if you disagree with me, the point is that it's blithe. What they're doing is showing you that they're just going to use the facts don't apply. Simple way to put it. It's whatever narrative they yell the loudest.
Have been terrorizing our communities. TDA is a vicious gang that has taken the lives of American women. And our age. So
point is, if you can't hear him, she goes, they're a dangerous gang over everybody. He goes, I'm not denying that. And she just keeps going. Why? Because if you just yell all the bad things this gang has done, and the background assumption is that they're all part of that gang, well, then you're trying to cover for these rapists and murderers, even though none of them are actually proven to have done any of those things or even part of the gang. But that's how this works. That's what Glenn was saying. Because they're terrorists because we said so. How dare you? It's embarrassing in a way that anyone even falls for this.
Agents on the front lines take our communities. TDA is a vicious gang that has taken the lives of American women. And our agents on the front lines take deporting these people with the utmost seriousness. And there is a litany of criteria that they use to ensure.
Yeah, 8 points, 2 of which will get deported. Very easy to prove.
Ensure that these individuals qualify as foreign terrorists and to ensure.
Do you realize how crazy that is? Even what he's saying, they don't prove you're a foreign terrorist. Like, the point is the document shows you 2 points of 8 potential that would be used to deem you might be connected to a gang that they've labeled a terrorist. I mean, again, I want to reiterate that if you can't see how flimsy this is and how clearly the principle applies to whoever they want to aim it at, I don't know why we wouldn't see Americans coming next. I'm not trying to scare anybody. They've already floated that idea, which I'll play in a minute. It just seems obvious to me. Why wouldn't it? This is the direction it's all going in, and the principle applies. It is the same violation as if it were Americans right now.
To ensure that they qualify for deportation. And the president made it incredibly clear to the American public that there would be a mass deportation campaign.
Yeah, well, the point again, as always, is that if you want to deport them, you'd have to provide the evidence to justify that claim, as many judges have now ruled. They're just trying to bull rush right over it.
Of not just foreign terrorists, but also illegal criminal aliens who have been wreaking havoc on American communities. And shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals.
She went there, right? Shame on you. So the question was, the ICE document they released shows that only takes 2 points. Your comment. Shame on you for defending these evil villain terrorist rapist murderers. I mean, that's a cartoon, guys. Like, this is why if you've pulled away from this long enough, this is just, you almost have to laugh if it wasn't so terrifying. That is stupid. It's ignorant. It is lazy. Just basic ideas, guys. What they're doing is, flailing over into a conversation that's not even really, it's a basic question. And what does that show you? They don't have an answer for it. So the answer is lie, deviate, deflect. Typical politics.
This is a vicious gang, Andrew. This is a vicious gang that has taken.
He's saying, I'm not trying to ask that. She's trying to yell over him. It's a gang. It's a gang. It's a gang. It's narrative control. And it's clumsy, in my opinion.
The lives of American women.
The government filed in court, which says all.
And you said yourself there are 8 criteria on that document.
They need 8 points.
And you are questioning the credibility of these 8.
So wait, now she just went away from it. Or like at first it was, no, that's not true. And now she's referencing the same 8 points that he was pointing to in one, like she hadn't even stopped talking. And it started where it was, you're wrong. And now it is right. And you're wrong. I mean, do these people even look at themselves? Do they stand back and go, damn it, that was a bad one. I ruined that. It doesn't matter. In the same conversation, it's not even done. You can take both narratives and run with it. Sounds very Israeli propaganda to me. We'll give you whatever you want. You get to pick. Which one do you prefer?
Agents who are putting their life on the line to protect your life and the life of everybody in this group and everybody across the country. And their credibility should be questioned. They finally have a president who is allowing them to do their jobs, and God bless them for doing it.
God, it's scary. I mean, at least she's better at just screaming over people. Like she can string sentences together. She's way better than KJP, but it's the same shtick. Let's go. Remember the question? Comment on these points? Well, she essentially confirmed that it was real, but just simply said it's complete, even though you started off by saying it wasn't real. Well, as Glenn says again, same BS we got from the Bush-Cheney-Obama war. So left-right paradigm continuing to manipulate. But so the main point is what she's trying to say there. All of them are criminals. They're all gang members, even though we can prove that's not true. Now, Aaron also puts this out, the one we were already highlighting before, the main points. And here's the document, guys. You can literally look at this for yourself. Read through it. It says, in order for ICE to declare someone an alien enemy, ICE must first determine if they are Venezuelan, over age 14, and then second, find 8 points on a scoring guide they made up. It's 4 points for having alleged gang tattoos and 4 points for displaying gang logos. That's 2 things, guys. So, and then again, the random arbitrary things they've declared tattoos that are related to them. So if you are Venezuelan over a certain age and have a tattoo, I guess, that is enough. It says this checklist is shocking. A person can be declared an alien enemy, and realize this is only because of the Alien Enemies Act. So it's like everything else in COVID and the emergency and the Defense Production Act. Same thing. They're using this claim to create an emergency declaration that allows them to ignore what's otherwise the reality. This is just government today, guys. But it says based only on communications with someone ICE says is a member and nothing more. Like the guy, the asset they said claimed he was there, even though no one's proving that. The evidence fact shows that it's not even true. You get the point. You can read through it, guys. It's all outlined. Very clear. Links are at the bottom. Verify it for yourself. What's crazy to me is that they're so spun around this, so I think exposed, that they're just kind of throwing whatever at the wall when they get confronted, or using emotional pushback to scare people into place. Now, it's important to understand where they are sending these people. This is the conversation. The article is from the March 17th. Beatings, overcrowding, and food deprivation. U.S. deportees face distressing human rights conditions in El Salvador's mega prison. Now, you can read this one. It's rough, but I thought the best part to go for would be just the Human Rights Watch article. This is from March 20th of this year. Human Rights Watch declaration on prison conditions in El Salvador for the specific case, the JGG versus Trump case. Just wanted to get some bullet points. The prison was first announced for capacity of 20,000. There hasn't been any improvements or additions. They just randomly doubled it to 40,000. Even though there's, I think, more than that now. But the point is that it's about expanding the capacity for need, not by, there's no needs being met here. Just like with Israel, everything they're publicly telling you and praising. Ben-Gvir will walk through and praise how terrible it is, and you can prove what he's pointing to is a violation of international law. They don't care, like everything else. These things are not in compliance with basic human rights. Everyone knows that. That's why it's being called out. Why? And they're funding the building of torture camps here, and they're sending people there. They have before. This is not new, and they know they're breaking the law. They don't care. These people, the U.S. government and their allies, are actively showing you what they are. Rampantly lawless, acting with might is right. It says not be able to provide individualized treatment to detainees, thereby contravening the UN standard for minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. Which, by the way, the U.S. government, both left and right, have called out about Iran in many cases incorrectly, or Venezuela. So just pointing out that they'll happily scream, UN resolution, international law when it applies to anybody they don't like, but then ignore it on a regular, consistent basis for themselves. Now, people held at CCOT, this prison, as well as in other prisons in El Salvador, are denied communication with their relatives and lawyers. That's already being proven. And only appear, as I already told you, before courts in online hearings, often in large groups of several hundred people at the same time. So we already heard from them. Trump's going, I don't even know if we can get it back. Because these people are treated like, I don't even know how to frame this properly. They're sent there for life, apparently, with no process, no ruling. They do hard labor. They get no sunlight. They have, they're tortured. They're beat up. It's all documented. And maybe, I don't even know why you would think that's appropriate with the way we pretend we believe the world should be from the American narrative. For anybody, by the way, anybody, let alone somebody who is not even a criminal. Let alone somebody who didn't even break the law at all and was here legally and had no criminal record. Pretend it's your father, your mother, your son, your daughter, your sister, who just got sent there because they had the wrong tattoo and they were in the wrong place and are now in the prison with some of the worst, hardest, most dangerous people in the world. By the way, many of which are working alongside the prison guards and doing all sorts of terrible things. Just take a second and put aside your political beliefs and think about how alarming that is. And let's be clear. That's not a hypothetical. That's happening. To what degree is the question? The Salvadoran government has described people held in CCOT as, quote, terrorists, and has said they will, quote, never leave. Even though even the people in their country are not being given process. This is what's important. Human Rights Watch is not aware of any detainees who have been released from that prison, ever. The government of El Salvador denies human rights groups access to its prisons and has only allowed journalists and social media influencers to visit CCOT under highly controlled circumstances. The old North Korean tour. In videos produced during these visits, Salvadorian authorities are seen saying that prisoners only, quote, leave their cell for 30 minutes a day. And if I understand, that's not even accurate. It's less, if not at all. But it says, and that some are held in solitary confinement cells, which are completely dark. The point I was going to make is it says down here, El Salvador literally passed an emergency law that removed due process. Do you realize there's more to this than just coincidence, guys? This is where they're going. And so the point is that you have people in this country, in this prison, that have been put there because they decide to, with nothing else. This is who your government's working with, as they pretend Syria, Iran, and they're all the villains of the world, as they're literally working with the worst people on the planet. Now, you could argue Iran's the same thing if you want. I disagree. The point, though, is that you have to recognize who they are. You don't work with these kind of places and pretend you're the good guy, guys. It says, cases of torture, ill treatment, incommunicado detention, severe violations of due process, if at all, and inhumane conditions such as lack of access to adequate healthcare and food. Now, these are basically benign with the reality of what these prisons are like. These are just highlighting clear, provable examples of crimes. What they're doing is inconsistent. It's a violation of international law. They know that. They don't care. Clearly, they feel like they've got, and it seems they do, the support and protection of the U.S. apparatus, criminal gang. It says prison conditions in El Salvador should be understood within the context of the country's 3-year-long state of emergency, which has suspended constitutional due process rights. Which, by the way, let's be real, is never going to come back unless something changes, because that's how these governments work. Governments never give back power. We're sadly going to see that very soon in this country, if not already. Human Rights Watch estimates based on official data that there are 109,000 people held in prisons with an official capacity for 70,000. Since the state of emergency was instituted, over 350 people have died in these prisons. It's a pretty high rate. Something's happening. The people aren't just dying from old age, guys. It says we can arrest anyone we want was a report that the El Salvadorian prison system put out, literally entitled, "We can arrest anyone we want." When they tell you who they are, you got to listen, guys. In July 2024, Human Rights Watch published a report on abuses committed against children during the so-called state of emergency, titled, quote, "Your child does not exist here." Make sure I didn't. Yeah, I thought so. So the point is, back to this, that it says during the state of emergency that's still ongoing, apparently, the title, the Human Rights Watch put out a report called "Your Child Does Not Exist Here." And it says over 3,300 children have been detained. Children. Sound familiar? Many without any ties to gang activity or criminal organizations. Also sounds familiar. Just happened to be the wrong person, or rather the right person in the wrong place. Just, certain affiliation, certain skin color. It says Human Rights Watch documented 66 cases of children subjected to torture, ill treatment, and appalling conditions, including at times extreme overcrowding, unhygienic conditions, and inadequate access to food and medical care. Children. In February, the Legislative Assembly approved a law ordering the transfer of children detained for organized crime offenses without really having any crimes, as we just highlighted, to the country's adult prison system, exposing them to a heightened risk of abuse and violating international juvenile justice standards. So does Israel every day. Children, guys. Children sent to the same prisons we're talking about without any crime ever being proven, without many of them not even being criminals. It says police beat prison newcomers with batons for an hour, according to people that were there. When he denied being a gang member, they sent him back to a dark basement in a cell with 320 detainees, where prison guards and other detainees beat him every day. How much of this is going to sound so shockingly similar to what we know is happening elsewhere, right? He said he wasn't Hamas, so they beat him until he said he was. I mean, it should sound familiar, right? Since we just talked about this. Let me see if I can still have it. I don't think I do.
Orthopedic surgeon colleague here who was taken out of the operating room. His fingers were crushed.
This is in Israel. Doctor speaking about Israel.
They showed him a picture of his wife from a spy, not from a magazine or an old photo, and and it had a metadata and said it was taken the day before up close and said, we're going to bring her here in front of you and we're going to gang rape her in front of you if you don't admit that you're Hamas, or we'll keep breaking your fingers. He still didn't admit he was Hamas, and they said, well, then we're going to send a drone through your bedroom window and incinerate your children, and he still wouldn't admit he was Hamas. They beat him every.
You get it. It goes on, okay? These are doctors who are witnessing this stuff. So it's kind of eerie to see how clear this is, right? I mean, to see that this is, that's what they're doing. All right, so they're saying when he denied being a gang member, they put him in a group of people that beat him up until he did it. Now it says, was so crowded that detainees had to sleep on the floor or standing, a description often repeated by people who have been imprisoned in El Salvador. Now, the important part up here is, by the way, the people in the prison, as well as the as the prison guards, collectively beating him. Now it says, and by the way, that's no different than U.S. prisons, guys. We have to understand how much that overlap is here, where there's an operation that exists in there where prison guards benefit wildly from facilitating the process. Now, I'm not saying everyone everywhere, but we know that exists. Now it says he was sent in a group of other prisoners to a different prison on the third day, where they were ordered the group to take off their clothes. It's just one example of how this works. They were then forced to kneel on the ground, which sounds familiar, naked, looking downwards for 4 hours in front of the prison's gate. I don't know any other place I've ever seen that happen other than Israel with members of people in Palestine, where they have them kneeling like this in front of these. Where is that? I've seen that exclusively in Israel. Maybe I'm just missing it, but realize how interesting. Bukele is a Zionist, guys. It's not a secret. Now it says guards took the group to a room with 5 barrels full of water with ice. He said 15 guards forced him and others to go into the barrels for around 2 hours in total, ice barrels, as they questioned him. The detainee was forced into a barrel around 30 times as he was kept there for about a minute. Guards forced his head underwater so he could not breathe. He said, I felt like I was drowning. Guards repeatedly insulted them, calling them dogs and scum, and were saying they would pay for what they had done. Now, these are people, again, not charged with crimes. There's no due process, especially since realize we're talking about people being sent to these prisons like a gay barber or a random son of a 22-year-old son of a mom who's screaming about where his son is gone, who simply had the wrong tattoo, who was here legally in the country, or the other 7, 8, 9, 10 of these people we've talked about that you can prove. Who leave it's doubling down and going, they're dangerous gang members, we can prove it. No, they're not. And you're lying about that, and your own documents prove that. But this is what they're dealing with. They sent them here for a reason. Doctors who visited detention sites told us that tuberculosis, fungal infections, scabies, severe malnutrition, and chronic digestive issues were common. You know why that doesn't matter? Because they're not even trying to treat these people. They don't care if people get sick. They're not trying to help them. This is the reality we're seeing in every single dynamic of Israeli detention centers or the black sites for the United States. Number 14, in one case, a person who had died in custody was buried in a mass grave without the family's knowledge. U.S. policy 2025. A third man described being kicked by guards in his neck and abdomen, after which he sustained injuries requiring an operation for a ruptured pancreas and spleen, month-long hospitalization, and 60 days of post-release treatment. There was a lot more. This is a documented, sourced Human Rights Watch investigation. Doesn't mean you should blindly trust it. Look into it. The reality is this is what everybody on this situation, this is what El Salvador proudly displays. So the New Republic, rather just wanted to highlight this point, Homeland Security Secretary's El Salvador stunt just got worse. Now you can read more about the whole thing. I just want to point out everything we just saw, what we could prove, knowing that there was a lot of innocent people with no criminal records who were legally in the country, who were in that prison with some of the most dangerous people in the world. This is what she did.
Today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face.
Wow, just for coming illegally to the country? Even if you're going through the gates and asking for asylum? Apparently. So, I mean, even if you believe that, why in the world would it be the legal, constitutional, even international law to send somebody in this country who simply broke immigration law with no criminal record to a concentration camp in El Salvador? Why wouldn't you send him to a prison in this country? Why wouldn't you send them to a jail? I mean, it's a minor thing in the real context of what's going on in the world. It still is a crime, and it should be dealt with if somebody is trying to break the law. But somebody who's coming through asking for asylum, who in that medium process is still considered a legal alien, should not be treated this way, because that violates our own understanding of the law. The bottom line is she's standing there behind with a bunch of dangerous looking people behind her, simply saying this is everything, even though we've proven. I mean, look, I would love for somebody to show me one. I'm not saying it's not. In fact, I argue you're probably going to have plenty of them, but please, somebody prove to me that any one of the people they sent were actually people, members of a gang. Any of them. Because I have not seen that proven. They have not even tried to prove that. So as she stands there telling you all these people are criminals we sent, even though we can prove to you 7 or more of them are not, and we're here legally, I would like to find out if literally any of them were. Or if this is some kind of grotesque Israel manufactured torture dynamic for people that stood up and spoke about them. It's pretty disgusting. Right. And as somebody points out, that I think they did a whole post about this. She's wearing like $100,000 Rolex or whatever it is on her wrist while she's standing there. And people ask, like, how did she get that? How could she afford that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of questions to answer there. A lot of funding coming in from certain lobbying groups. But who knows? At the end of the day, she wants you to believe they're all bad and that this is the stunt to do it. And she also spent a lot of funds from her local dynamic to go there, which shouldn't be okay, but who cares?
First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility...
Oh, prosecuted. Wait a minute. That requires that's presenting evidence. That's levying accusations and going to court. Apparently, that's not what happens. Maybe you don't even understand your own administration's policies, because they just skipped over all of that. Prosecuted is not what just happened. They just deported them on an allegation. Again, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know what they're doing is a violation of your rights, of the Constitution. That's why they say things like that. That's why they were so, in the beginning, and still in many cases try to make it only about visas, because they think they have more standing there. They're trying to manipulate you. And I'm talking to the right. I'm talking about Republicans out there. They're trying to manipulate you into undermining what you believe in most. I don't know what else should make you more angry than that.
Is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Nope, because a crime requires evidence, allegations, charges. That's not what you're doing. It's just disgusting. And so the stunt should be an outrageous thing. That she stood there and tried to do this for no reason. She didn't just stand there in front of a prison to make the case. She could have said this anywhere. It's a stunt that she spent a lot of money on for no reason. And the reality is they're lying to you. Now, I really hope we don't miss this, guys, because this is one of the most important parts about this, even if it was floated to scare you, which that very well could be the case. And who else would it be for other than Israel? Because everything they're doing is about people who speak up about Israel. That's not even my opinion. So when he says, talking about sending any people, again, the context, whether it's about Teslas or anything else, about sending people they deem terrorists to this prison, and he doesn't even balk at it. He doesn't even flinch. Yes, that's the reality, and we may do that.
And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught, and they're going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. These are, when I looked at those showrooms burning.
Right. There's no way to miss this. People in the comments are like, he didn't even say that. They're probably bots or just trying to deceive people so they don't look. But Tesla terrorists, yes, they're terrorists. If you look at the showrooms burning, pretty simple.
And those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists.
Right. Would it be easier? And let's be clear, before this little statement, he already said this. He floated the idea about these people getting sent to El Salvador. It was a Truth Social post, very public. Then that's why Ducey here followed up and said, reiterate that. So he said again, yes, I think they're terrorists. There's no error in this conversation, guys. Would it be easier or less to send these people? Yes, they're terrorists, is what his answer was. He's talking about American citizens sent to a foreign country for a crime committed in this country, or the allegation of a crime as small as vandalism, or even the most extreme in the conversation, which would be a combination of arson and vandalism, is a federal crime and could be up to 20 years. So it's not even that outrageous for the person that committed that crime. But not everybody, they're just broadly scooping in because they claim it's this coordinated thing, which maybe it is, but we should damn well demand that they prove these claims. But see, we're in this kind of weird quasi, no more source material Twitter files dynamic where they just go the thing and they go, yeah, the thing, and they all just rush ahead. That's partisanship. But as I said, Trump floats sending American citizens to an El Salvadorian prison. This is an attack on all you believe you're fighting for under the thin veneer of fighting Democrats. There are already laws in place to hold these people accountable. Very much so. Now, the last part of this, before we finish with some overlaps to Israel, WikiLeaks put this out on the 30th. You probably already saw it. Had hundreds of foreign students in the United States have been told, and I actually think this kind of stems from that one guy basically choosing to deport himself. They probably like, oh, that's a good idea. And so they said they're now foreign students in the U.S. who have been told they must self-deport, or they will be forcibly deported for campus activism. This is WikiLeaks, including attending protests or posting on social media. I'm going to read you from the article. It's very clear. This comes after the launch of an AI system. Guess what? An AI system called Catch and Revoke. It's all falling into place, isn't it, guys? Now, how long until they repurpose that AI system to just anybody not saying the right things on social media, not having a high enough social credit system score, or, I don't know, just challenging whatever the new thing is you're not supposed to challenge because the government says. I say in the last couple of weeks, I've said this a lot, but I have never in my time doing this ever seen something so vividly in the wrong direction. So clearly, for years, we've all been talking about this kind of thing, whether it's taking the guns or free speech for years. And in all of my time doing this, I've never seen a more striking and obvious example of exactly what we've all been worried about. Just because they use the thing they know some of you don't like, and in some cases Democrats, some cases immigrants. It's just a minor shift to an AI system that's about catch and revoke. He just made the case for why that can happen to people bombing Teslas or even scratching Teslas. They don't even need to change the name. They can just broaden the scope and say, well, now your citizenship is revoked because you did what we call terrorism. It's all right there in front of you. Hey, maybe it never happens. I hope not. Maybe it's all a scare tactic. It's obviously possible. And maybe the Democrats roll it out with the next administration because it's all the same thing. God, it's so crazy. Now, getting the point, overlapping back to the beginning with Palantir and XAI, it's an AI system. They're using AI to map out everything and scoop your data from all these massive billion-dollar systems to train what they're going to train the system that will be used to catch and revoke, to control your life. It says, which trolls social media for politically incorrect speech. The woke right, ladies and gentlemen, the exact thing that they were trying to push back on, they're now supporting. I don't believe most of them. I think most of them are going, what the F? I think that. I can't prove it. You are now going after people for politically incorrect speech. How is that not the same Democrats you thought you were fighting? Speaking to reporters, Rubio said, quote, every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visas. At some point, I hope we run out, he says. I'll quote from the article. The point being that you just broad stroke what most, look, everyone we can actually prove has already been shown to be here legally, or at the very least, not breaking any of their laws and got due process removed. Most of the ones we talked about were legally and no criminal record. And every time we find one of these lunatics, so what they're doing is just finding someone that meets the criteria and they're yanking these things. Even the worst of the worst would still get due process. So they're just brazenly admitting that your rights don't matter to them, guys. Not just Democrats, but anyone, Americans included at large. And Dana McAdams says this is anti-American. We value speech. Apparently not all of us. I do believe it's the majority. Now, this is F1 visas. That's what are being revoked in this context, but it's more than that. is why U.S. is asking hundreds of international students to self-deport. I mean, even that is sort of insulting, right? Self-deport, so you don't have to spend the resources. They're not breaking the law. I mean, it's insane. But it says hundreds of international students studying in the United States have received emails from the Department of State telling them to self-deport as their F-1 visas, student visas, have been revoked owing to campus activism. So remember the game in the beginning where it was like, well, they're here illegally and they're terrorism. So the best they can do now is claim that you simply supported or protested for something we say is supporting terrorism. I've never seen something so flimsy in my life. And we can prove that most of them were simply saying, stop the genocide. And they are not even, they're not even trying, they're going, just go get out of the country for us. Don't even make it, just get out, self-deport for politically protected speech, for activism, whatever it's about. Where are all the honest Republicans screaming about this, guys? I know they're out there. Most conservatives in the middle are talking a lot about this, but the people that are really tapped into the center of the Republican side of this, most of which are team sport Republicans, in my opinion, but guys, there's plenty of you that I know have a line. How is this not it? It says the crackdown is not limited to students who physically participated, not even physically in the activism, but people who simply shared or even liked what they said were anti-national posts. Guys, that's so over the top. So people who simply saw a protest of something going, free Palestine, and they liked that post, they're now being emailed saying, we want you to leave the country for anti-national posts. This is authoritarianism. This is fascism. And that's not a political thing, guys. I think they're both sides of our paradigm are actively driving you there. It says the dictate followed U.S. Secretary of State Rubio's announcement about the revocation of several international students' visas for so-called anti-national activities. If you look at history, this is the beginning of pretty much every authoritarian severe situation that you can see. It all starts like this. Now it says, quote, it might be more than 300 at this point. 300 for that kind of stuff. We do it every day, he says. That's the other point, saying, I hope we run out because we've done it so much. The guy's trying to double down to give himself security, hoping that if he just yells loud enough that he's right, the people will just fall back and let it happen. It says, I take their visas away. Every country in the world has the right to decide who comes in and who gets a visa. Yeah, you're right. In the process, you can do that. Now that they've been given a visa, they're required to have due process. That is the law. He just keeps trying to skip over this with the same flimsy, broad arguments of, well, we can deny whoever we want. Yeah, no one's disputing that. That's the same thing Levitt did to the guy asking a question. He's going, I didn't ask that. You're not even listening to me. You're a terrorist. You don't support them. So the same point to Rubio. The point is, well, they would get due process. I'm not talking about when they come in first. Well, I have the right when they first come in and they lied. And so we get to move. No, you don't. You are wrong. And they know they're wrong. That's why I go back to desperate. You'd think they'd be able to paint something better than this if they had other options. Quote, at some point, I hope we run out because we've gotten rid of all of them. But we're looking every day for these lunatics. And the followers scream they're all lunatics because Rubio said. By the way, even though Rubio was the one primarily inviting Venezuelans to this country under the guise that Maduro's so bad, come take refuge in the country of your savior, and then now arresting them and putting them in prisons. This is what happens when you lean into the worst people on the planet, right? It's like you could look at all the people that they're working with. People like Saddam Hussein, by the way, or Osama bin Laden, you go down the list. They're allies until they're suddenly not. The point is that they use the Venezuelans to act like they were there to help because Maduro's so bad, even though they were the ones manufacturing the situation. And then when they showed up, in some cases, they were arrested then. I talked about it all the way back then. But here we are. Many of them were there from that conversation, and he's the one in charge now of putting them in prison. It's just vile. These people are bad. On behalf of the United States Department of State, the Bureau of Consular Affairs Visa Office hereby informs you that additional information became available after your visa was issued. See, this is them trying to paint the picture that you lied. You came in this country planning to protest against things you don't believe in. Oh my God. What they're making out to be is terrorism. If you would have wrote down, as he keeps repeating, that you were going to do these violent protests and commit terrorism, then we would have let you in. Yeah, duh. The point is that that's not what happened. And even then, like about protesting, what if they came in and then decided to protest it later? They're just lying to you. This is the best they can do. It says, as a result, your F1 visa is now revoked, which is a crime. That's not due process. That's not how this works. And that's why the judges are ruling as such. And their best response is they're radical, which probably doesn't change the fact that they're right. Now, Patrick Henningsen says Israel now publicly is bragging about its right or its power over U.S. speech. Not the first time. Netanyahu speaking about this, and former Ambassador Friedman openly telling you that these people, and I'll listen to it for yourself, about the very people we're talking about. I'm pretty sure it's been proven at this point, I shouldn't say pretty sure, we just went over it, that most, I mean, if not all that we can see are non-violent, not criminal record, here legally. And this is what Netanyahu has to say. Now ask yourself where you think the mindset's coming from when this is what's being driven in by the foreign government.
These ignorant demonstrators. Who are they demonstrating for? For these murderers, these rapists?
Nope. And in fact, the rape is a lie. Even Israel proved that. And you know that. They're protesting for Palestinian freedom. Simple.
These mass killers. This is a reflection of a deep rot that has pervaded the intellectual hub of free societies. And
he's right, and he represents it. But what he's doing is pointing to the people trying to stop him from doing that. Accuse them of that which you are guilty. Classic Nazi propaganda is where it comes from.
This vilification of Israel, the Jewish people.
Nope, we're only talking about Israel. The conflation of those two things is how he tricks people.
And Western values.
Yeah, which they don't have entirely in this country. I mean, look into what they're practicing in this country. And there's plenty of Israelis that speak out about these things, but by and large, the sick, rotting society is what Zionism has done to Israel.
Has been propagated by a systemic alliance between the ultra-progressive left and radical Islam.
Of course, the straight-up fact-free Loomer argument, right? They're all a bunch of Islamic terrorists. Well, it's interesting that I don't see that it's illegal to criticize Islam in this country, or that it's illegal to, I mean, you can go on with 100,000 examples. The old Voltaire quote, or attributed, right? To know who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. I can criticize in this country, apparently right now, you can criticize just about everything except Israel. But that doesn't always prove everything. The bottom line.
And radical Islam.
Is that radical Islam is something that he personally and the U.S. government have been proven to have been funding for decades. Hamas is obvious. The point is you can prove this over and over and over, whether it is Saudi Arabia in general or the moderate rebels or every single example, Osama bin Laden that they worked with. Let's not forget the Washington Post called Osama bin Laden a warrior of peace before he became the biggest boogeyman alive. This is always how this goes. They have collectively funded the most radical elements of Islam as far back as you want to look. That's why the evidence is pouring out right now, because people are finally caring to look. But he's trying to paint the same picture. No. It's not that. It's what we want you to think, as Zionism is infiltrating everything in the world.
It must be resolutely fought by civilized societies to safeguard their future. This is why we must all commend President Trump's decisive actions against anti-Semitism.
Right. The fundamentally unconstitutional things they're doing. Yay! Freedom, America. Also, let's not forget, this man standing here has multiple indictments, and most of his country right now is clamoring for him to be arrested. Look it up. I mean, it's wildly public. What's crazy is that we're being told we have to support them as our chief ally when this guy is leading the most radical, extremist, dangerous group I've seen in power in a really long time. And his own country is saying that. It's not hard to look up. I just don't know why we can't have this honest conversation, unless it's because this group has completely taken control of our government. I do think that, but you can decide for yourself, guys. It is transparent that the influence is coming directly from these maniacs, and not even the entirety of the country or the government, because you can see them calling these people out. So this feels like a desperate pulling of every string they have to avoid what seems to be coming, that the world sees who they are and what they're doing. Zionism. And those strings are tied directly to the feet, arms, head, face, tongue of every person in this country who has a political position of power. That's what it feels like. You tell me where I'm missing something.
And we must pressure other governments to do the same.
A government can do in 2 months more than any organization can do in its lifetime.
Yes.
And so when we talk about the importance of a bipartisan fight against anti-Semitism, which of course I endorse, and I, as my predecessor said, I condemn anti-Semitism on the right and on the left. I'm an equal opportunity condemner of
Right. So the point is they're going after everyone who does not toe a certain line. And it's not about anti-Semitism, because we've already proven this 50,000 times over. I mean, the ADL can get caught, publicly reported, even by Jewish groups, that they were simply calling everything Palestine anti-Semitism, or, whatever it is, over and over every year, as far back as you want to look, these things keep getting exposed. Or that you get ADL gets caught doing a fake Nazi march through Chicago. They're all easily proven. I've done entire shows on this stuff. The bottom line is that they're trying to control speech through one narrative, and it works for all authoritarians, quite frankly. But all they're really saying is that we can control the way you speak in this country. And anti-Semitism is just the tool that's used. And you have IDF agents, Mossad agents, former leaders in Israel who have all spoken out about how that's the tool that they publicly, like within their circles, that's what they acknowledge. We use this to control the way they think it's. It's all public. That should matter to you. As Patrick says, Israel now publicly bragging it has power over U.S. speech. Daniel McAdams says the noose around free speech is starting to tighten. It will not stop with deporting foreign students who write op-eds. I agree. And this is all happening right now. This is from the 30th. NYU has now canceled a speech by the former president of Doctors Without Borders because she was going to discuss the genocide in Gaza. A slide about the death toll in Gaza, quote, could be perceived as anti-Semitic. My God. You see, and look, you know why? Because the schools are now terrified to step afoul of Trump's draconian anti-Semitism policies, where they're going to say, well, fine, we're going to yank everything we possibly can. We're going to pressure you to get fired. The Loomers and Benny Johnson of the world will tar and feather you across social media until everyone pushes back. That's how this works. And what did they do? Invited somebody to talk about something that can be proven. Doctors Without Borders has been bombed by Israel in Gaza, or rather in West Bank, more than once. I think also in Gaza, to be honest, or in Lebanon. We've seen that as well. The bottom line is they were going to highlight numbers that have been roundly proven by different groups, including was it British Medical Journal or the Lancet? It was the Lancet. Or Human Rights Watch, or on and on and on and on. And Amnesty did their own investigation and confirmed the same thing. But no. That might be anti-Semitic, or might be seen, could be perceived dishonestly as anti-Semitism. So anything that makes Israel look bad now becomes anti-Semitism. That's not even like a secret. They basically read their definition. It's anything that says we're doing something wrong because you hate Jews, apparently. Or maybe because they're committing genocide and starving children to death and raping people in prisons. But, I'm a racist, apparently. Dave Smith says, does this settle the who's woke debate? Rabbi tells the Senate anti-Semitism, that it says hate being anti. He says, it's weird to read it that way. Rabbi tells Senate hearing on anti-Semitism that it's not enough to be not anti-Semitic. One must be anti-Semitic. And this goes back to previous arguments, guys. This has been something, actually, I'll read what he says here. Well, this verse. So basically, Dave Smith is calling out the woke right, guys. Because if you don't recognize what that means, there's people trying to kind of undermine the terms. It simply means people who are using cancel culture, ideological driven arguments, censorship based on hate speech. These are the main tenets, guys. And you can see the exact same things all over the place. I'll talk about it more in the upcoming show, but people like Cat Turd and the rest are screaming people should be put in prison because they dared to, in some cases, legitimately scratch a Tesla. Or in some cases, women saying mean things about Trump, and they're like, put them in jail. I mean, it's insane. And they are the woke right. In fact, I think they probably don't even care. I think that's what their job is. At the end of the day, if you had any self-awareness, you'd be like, wow, I am the same thing we were all screaming about 30 seconds ago. But they don't. But here's the clip. As Dave Smith says, does this settle who's woke debate?
Anti-Semitism is not just an age-old prejudice. It is a contemporary crisis manifesting on campuses across the nation. It is not enough for individuals or institutions to merely claim they are not anti-Semitic. As my father once taught me, it is not enough for people, especially public figures, to be neutral or not be anti-Semitic. One must be anti-Semitic. We must demand the same of our universities and government institutions.
Okay, so the reason that's important, as I think Candace Owens was back and forth with somebody, it's like, look, it's how is it not enough to just be against anti-Semitism? Or just to say that I'm like, to be like, look, I'm not anti-Semitic or I'm not racist. I don't say anything negative about any group because of their skin color, right? But no, he says, the point is, they're saying you have to mobilize against it. You have to stand up and do something about it. Otherwise, you're anti-Semitic. No, that's not how that works. Frankly, you don't even have to be anything. We pretend in this country, as always, you can think and say what you want, which would include being racist against Jewish people or racist against black people, whatever you want. I have the right to say you're gross. That's how it works. The idea that we've ever got to a point to where you can see you're not allowed to think bad things or say bad things about this group, which, by the way, was exactly what the left was doing. But see, they tricked you by going after things they knew you wouldn't agree with, and now you're being trapped in the other direction. They're simply telling you that you have to think and say the way in certain categories what we think and say. That's it. That doesn't apply in any conversation. And the only one where it has to, according to them, is when it comes to Israel. I don't know how you miss these things. It's the most
This hearing in my
I've ever seen, the most obvious thing I've ever seen. Now, Chris Menahan says the same point, and he just points out, didn't conservatives mock Ibram X. Kendi for saying the same stuff? Of course they did. Of course, in the background, the reality is that you attack the left for doing the thing that you think is dumb, and then when it happens on your side, it's okay because we agree with the ideology over here, or vice versa. Same damn thing everywhere you look. Patrick says it's clear in regard to WikiLeaks about the self-deportation that Donald Trump is betraying our Constitution and the most important provision, the First Amendment. Same with Marco Rubio, State Department. Remember your oath. Oh, I don't think they care. Or let's not forget, Trump didn't even take an oath on a Bible, which I do think matters. And Elon and the rest of them apparently didn't either. Not Rubio. Now it says, you are allowing a foreign lobby to dictate how protected speech is interpreted. History will not look well on what you have done here. Now look, it could be perceived as a small point. But if we're truly beginning to recognize the influence that this foreign government has on this government, would it not be worth considering that they were at least, chose not to swear an oath on the Bible because there's certain radical Jewish people that want that to be something different? It's worth asking. Now realize, again, Zionism is not just about Jewish people, but there is a very clear overlap of Jewish supremacy. Just like on the Christian side, there's the same dynamic. Or atheist Zionists who are maniacs. All of it exists. And for those that just might want to make it about something else. Oh, it's the wrong one. I always think it's worth pointing out. This is not, I'm not even saying that because that's exactly the bottom line is, here is the leading Israeli human rights group that says a regime of Jewish supremacy. The point is to say that is not to imply that's what this is all about. Maybe it is, you can decide for yourself, but it is part of this. The Jewish Power Party, I believe that's Ben Gvir's party, is literally what they call themselves. Can you have a white power party? Yeah, we all know it. That's racist, right? It's just insane. The point is, though, these are all rabid Zionists who are using Judaism to hide behind. And there's a huge faction of Orthodox Jews in the world that are calling that out. My point, though, is to make sure you see that, yes, that is part of it. That's why it's a nuanced conversation, and making it only about one of these groups is the trap. But that's the point to think about. When, the swearing your oath, isn't that interesting? But Daniel simply says, Trump and his people have exposed themselves as even more fascist than Biden's thugs. I did not know that was possible. They actually hate America. Well, it starts to feel that way, despite their screaming claims. Well, to end in general with the Israel overlap, here's Donald Trump saying, America first, patriot, Randy Fine, who we've talked about a lot on this show, that seems everyone's finally starting to recognize as a maniac, is running to represent the wonderful people of Florida. This is, I think, the second or third time he's endorsed him so publicly. A highly successful Harvard-educated businessman with greatly respected state legislator has been tremendous voice for MAGA. Very important to understand all this. The rest of it's just what he wants you to hear about him. Champion over this and that, peace for that. Of course, advance peace through strength, of course, because it's all about violence to achieve our ends. Randy Fine has my complete and total endorsement. That's the important part. Well, Gen X Girl says, are you effing kidding me? This guy is hated in Florida by conservatives, which is pretty publicly true. And he says, this is Randy Fine hiding under his desk when he was being served. After this video went viral, he tried to change the law in Florida so servers couldn't record his fat ASS hiding. Now, I'm not sure what he's being served for here. I think it's actually about the fact that there's a lot of crimes he's committing just by what he says, to be quite frank. You can see him duck down in the beginning.
Behind the desk. Under the desk.
Right there. It's just ridiculous. This is kind of a coward, if you ask me. But the point is he's getting money from AIPAC, first and foremost. And this guy's simply saying, here's the other candidate, not. But who knows? Maybe that guy will start getting it too if he gets put in power. But then Elon Musk goes, very important, because apparently his Twitter bot was told to say that. But Patrick Henningsen says a foreign lobby has literally purchased our entire government. This is not going to end well for anyone. And here is James Lee responding to Donald Trump, saying, America first, patriot Randy Fine, who has the Israel flag and a menorah front center in front of the American flag. That's the picture he put out, where the U.S. flag is cropped out. I mean, you could decide to pretend that that's an accident. I don't know how that would be possible. Or rather, unlikely, I would argue. But everyone seems to see this. Here he is, America's first patriot, or America First Patriot, as Trump claims it, demanding Americans who distribute flyers critical of Israel get 5 years in jail for, quote, hateful littering. Yeah, the woke right. For Israel seems to be the point. And then he follows up saying, note, the bill did pass, by the way, and was ceremoniously signed into law by Ron DeSantis while in Israel. It's not a joke. How is it even allowed to sign U.S. legislation in a foreign country? Here he is made a secret trip to Jerusalem with DeSantis, the strongest anti-Semitism bill in the United States. By the way, are completely unconstitutional, like every other one is. By saying somebody can't be anti-anything is a violation of your rights, and we all know that. Supreme Courts have ruled this many times. They just don't stop. Ask Abbott in Texas. These guys jam these things through, anti-BDS, all sorts of things. Then he goes to Florida's Nazi thugs, otherwise known as the conservatives that disagree with him, by the way. I have news. Attack Jews on their property and you're going to prison. Well, guess what, moron? You attack anybody on the property, you're going to prison. But you see, they're making it more criminal if they claim it's motivated by hate. And that is the woke left and right, guys. And then he literally says never again means never again, unless we're ignoring the ongoing genocide because it's not against a group that we don't like. Well, Candace Owens calls out something we've been trying to call attention to for a while. He says this is who President Trump just endorsed for office. This absolutely appalling and revealing as to who is in charge of the White House. Any person who can look at the picture of a murdered baby and mock it is a monster. Do not vote for this genocidal pig. And I said, he's one of many. Here's my post from March 22nd, 2025. This Trump-endorsed politician has been outspoken since October 7th that all Palestinians are the enemy, even the children. And I'm talking, he explicitly makes that case. Yes, the children, kill them all. Like, he is outspoken about it. Here is today's example, I said on March 22nd. And this is the thing she was showing. This is just the real breakdown on a screenshot. So here he up here is making a case. And the person basically says, calls him out for something, and he's responding. And this person says, supporting killing innocent people and babies and smearing voices that fight against genocide for some AIPAC money says a lot about your character. You should be ashamed of yourself. How do you sleep at night? And shows a dead baby that was dug up. This is a real shot of a baby being dug up from bombs that were bombing Gaza. He says, quite well, actually. Thanks for the pick. That's who Trump supported. That is milquetoast in compared to what he's done many other times. And I'll show them to you. Did I have it up twice? I guess so. So this is the one I put up today saying, since people are finally calling out Trump's continued support for the monster that is Randy Fine, take a look at his timeline. Before Twitter helps him scrub it, I'm willing to bet you that's probably already happening, whether Twitter or him, whatever, and see how common it is. Here's what he said on June 8th. Owen Jones said every single politician and commenter celebrating Israel's military operation should be asked a straightforward question. Do you think killing over 200 Palestinians, including many kids, is an acceptable price for 4 released Israeli hostages? Get them to say it on the record. He says, yes, bombs away. These are bad people, like objectively. I don't care what you make the conversation about. That's disgusting. Subhuman. Here's another one. That says, this is what so many of you are giddy about. Some of the patients, we had to remove both eyes. This is the pager bombing. 5 to 10 years. That's now Israel said 10 recently. So the point, at least 5 years later, after they released these pagers into the end of the world. And mostly women and children were the ones hurt. That's a provable fact. That says some of the patients we had to remove both their eyes. It killed me, she said. In the past 25 years in practice, I've never removed as many eyes as I did yesterday. And again, understand, on the record, the vast majority were women and children. He says, yep, eyes away. That's who Trump just endorsed. Now, 7Cs showed a bunch of these. He says there's so many, just search bombs away from his profile. This guy lusts for death like a psychopath. Now, honestly, I think whether it's the case or not, which it seems to be, he's just doing what Israel wants. And it seems to be like a sycophant. You gave him money, I'll say what you want. They probably, this is not me proving anything. I'm just saying with this way we know this works. They just like with, God, I forgot his name again. The big guy. God, it drives me crazy. He's the guy that's been so shamelessly pro-Israel because I think he's just too dumb to know what's going on around him. The guy, well before he had a brain issue, the guy was clearly not intelligent. The bottom line is that he is just like, or even like a Michael Rappaport. Like it's just, you can just see them just being given things and just putting them out. And let's not forget, that's been proven. That is the dynamic, that the Israeli government is basically paying people to just dump things they give them online. That's come out in mainstream media. So when you see a guy like this, who is just so aggressively over the top, I think that's what Israel wants to display in our government. But he could just also be that crazy. Oh yeah, it's that's not Fetterman. Thank you. The guy I was referring to as Fetterman. I mean, he's pro-Israel in many cases that are explicitly anti-America, like over the top. They don't care. That's why Randy Fine has an Israeli flag first and foremost in his office. But here, just to give you a couple examples, you can look at all these for yourself. It's time for Israel to retake Rafah and end Hamas. Well, bombs away. There's more that I think are more relevant about not just bomb them, which matters, but the kind of things that are like, look at all the kids that died. And he goes, good, they deserve it. Things like that. It's all over his timeline. Special delivery for Media Hamas, may it rain down from heaven, deliver by God himself to avenge those babies, which again, all these claims and lies they were putting out. But my point is, the main ones we showed you and the continuing down the list, you'll find examples of him being brazen about children being okay, that they're all terrorists, right? It's about all Palestinians. He reiterates that. And then here's Elon Musk. This guy saying anti-white racism should not be tolerated. And Musk says racism of any kind is unacceptable. Oh, is it, Elon? I guess only in certain contexts, though, right? And so I said, now do Israel and Zionism. Or how about Randy Fine and anything? Like, you guys are such gross hypocrites. Like, let's not pretend like it's not obvious that Elon Musk is in his own ways a racist in plenty of contexts. You can recognize that. It's not a left-right point. The guy is actively choosing sides in all sorts of racial divides. The point is that you can't keep making this about politics, about everything in these colors, then broad stroking every Muslim in Europe, for example. It's disgusting, and you're a bad person for doing so. The bottom line is that if you can't call out the most obvious example of racism on the planet, then you really don't believe in fighting, or that you don't think racism is a problem.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what I would like Israel to be. I'd like a democratic solution, one state with equal rights for all its inhabitants.
Avi Shlaim, I don't want to play the whole thing again. He talks about the nation-state law where they enshrine the reality that it's the state for the Jews alone, and makes the case that it's inherently racist, because it is. It takes a special willful ignorance to not acknowledge something that obvious because you're scared of being called racist, which is actually insane to think about. You're shying away from calling the most obvious racist thing racist because they're going to call you racist. I guess you could even call it well-crafted, but it's pretty insane. So Gen X Girl points out Randy Fine, the Hebrew hammer, is what they call him. In Trump's endorsement of Randy Fine, he listed graduating from Harvard as one of Fine's accomplishments. Well, guess what? This is an article from the Harvard Crimson about Randy Fine. While at Harvard, where he paid for votes and fraudulently took $24,000 in a grant. But, so who cares? It's not about that. It's about who leans into the Israeli agenda, apparently, and nothing else seems to matter. And if you just haven't seen by now, it's no different than what Trump is doing. It's one of the most obvious things in the conversation. So maybe you haven't heard him in a while. Seems like an important time to reiterate the obvious. I know people in the regular in the show, you already know this stuff, but maybe you've tuned in and out. With how much has evolved and where we are with all of this, maybe it's worth listening to what Trump said about Congress again.
You know, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress.
Pretty clear. And rightfully over Congress. You just can't misunderstand that, guys. And you feel free to watch the entire clip for yourself. It's obvious. Now, on top of that, especially with the same conversation, let's go back to the one where he said he'd remove the Jew haters from this country. Obvious what's happening, guys. That is a violation of your rights, even if it's actually Jewish people you hate. Not let alone just being pro-Palestine and then claiming you hate Jewish people like they do every day, everywhere in the conversation. But nonetheless, whichever side you're on, you still have the right to feel and think what you want. And he was already telling you, and we were screaming about it before the selection, pay attention, this is coming, and here we are.
We will remove the jihadist sympathizers and Jew haters. We're going to remove the Jew haters who do nothing to help our country. They only want to destroy our country.
God. What's sad is the people they're calling Jew haters in most contexts are the ones fighting for this country more than anybody, whether they realize it or not. Fighting for constitutional rights, fighting against a group who's actively undermining them for a foreign government. And he's telling you those are the ones that are hate our country. They're the ones acting within the, I mean, you get it. It's insane, guys. It's obvious. It is schizophrenic. But there's tons of those clips. This is just the ones that I highlighted. Now, to overlap with two more points, a few things from Israel itself, just to keep you updated about what's going on. And think about the comparison to what we're dealing with, or the places like El Salvador. Here's an example. You already saw this, March 29th. Inside Israel's torture jails, where Palestinians are held without charge, tell of brutal treatment. Gee, doesn't that sound like what we're talking about in El Salvador? Gee, isn't it interesting that Bukele's also a Zionist? Gee, isn't it interesting that Israel's being supported by the United States, who sent them to another prison? It's not interesting, guys. It's connection. It's obvious what's happening. Pay attention, because this is coming, and we need to do something about it. As you've already heard, Israel killed 15 Palestinian paramedics and rescue workers one by one, says the United Nations. They murdered them in ambulances. They buried them to try to hide it. Then they killed the people that came to try to find out. All very publicly. This has been I reported this a couple of shows ago. Dan Sheehan says, what will it take? I mean, it's a legitimate question at this point, guys. That's the Guardian. Not that means we can prove it. The point is, it's everywhere. The world is being introduced to this in ways that can't be ignored. They're straight up assassinating medical workers, Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, Central Kitchen. I mean, right on the surface, bombing an entire flour truck. I mean, the flour massacre. But every time they've got a narrative, and every time these sycophants who are being controlled just toe the line, and their party circle do the same, whether left or right. Because guess what? They did the same thing during Biden's administration when they towed the line. Now the right is doing the same thing. You're all on the same side. You can't even see it. Ori Goldberg says, can't get over the idea of killing 15 paramedics in Rafah, attempting to bury them in their ambulance, claiming they were terrorists, sounds familiar, and then shooting to kill the rescue team sent in to find their missing friends. Not surprised, just stuck. Can't seem to move on from here. And then Ori also says, every day, there's a bottom below rock bottom for Israelis. The images of IDF snipers killing UN Red Cross workers, rescue workers, attempting to find the bodies of the previous team killed by Israeli troops, these images escape articulation. Language and humanity disintegrate. And Israel exposed. It says mass graves of medics executed one by one. Footage has surfaced of the execution of burial site of 15 Red Crescent and civil defense workers in Rafah. On March 24th, IDF surrounded the 5 ambulances, and their crew members handcuffed them, executed them, buried them in mass graves, and destroyed the vehicles, and then killed the people trying to find out what happened. Guys, it's stuff like this that kills me. You have documented evidence from international workers. You've got video of them digging up their dead bodies. You have video. I mean, guys, they don't care. I don't know what more we need to see to recognize that the leaders of the Western world are not what they're controlled, but at the very least that they're not what they pretend they are. If we can't understand what we're looking at here, the amount of evidence, the amount of research, the ongoing, this is just one example of endless examples that they're caught. Here's another crazy overlap that you already know about. Guess what? Haaretz, March 30th, 2025. This is their headline, or rather their subtitle. In Gaza, human shields are used by Israeli soldiers at least 6 times a day. I served in Gaza for 9 months as an IDF member and came across these procedures in December 2023, writes an anonymous senior official in one of the brigades. In Gaza, human shields are used by Israeli soldiers at least 6 times a day for a year, if not 76 years, which is what the reality is. You see why they start leveling these accusations without anything, and they get picked up by the media and the Western leaders because they get ahead of the narrative. Sort of how Donald Trump grabbed the microphone before the COVID thing and said, China did it, Wuhan. And we spun out from there. Not even to say that some of that's not overlapping with the larger picture. It was about getting you in a clear direction for the narrative well before anything was verified, knowing that the U.S. was involved with whatever was going on. Every single time. But let's keep pretending like it's only bad guy Hamas. And even if you want to pretend Hamas is everything they claimed it was, you can't, the evidence isn't there. What you keep seeing is what they're saying here. 6 times a day they're using human shields in Gaza. We've only caught, 10 of them? But 10 of them's not enough, apparently. It was all misunderstood. And I'll include the show, The Open Secret of Israel's Use of Human Shields, back on November 9th, 2023. Support TLAV, and you're ahead of the story, guys. Well, to end on the point of Iran that overlaps with Israel, Pepe Escobar says this, and if you haven't seen this, I needed to include this just so you know what's going on. This deserves its own segment. He says it's getting completely out of hand. If Trump can't make a deal with Russia, he'll put, quote, secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia. That's war. You're going to create an economic war that will quickly lead to a hot war, probably by design. If Iran doesn't agree to his new nuclear deal, and this is a real thing. He said it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen. So if they don't agree to a deal with the guy who previously unilaterally broke the deal that they've really continued to maintain, and they've already said, just, basically piss off. We're not going to listen to you. Go do your own thing. He says they'll bomb them. So a country who you're accusing of seeking nuclear weapons, who, by the way, your own State Department says they're not. The International Atomic Energy Agency says they're not. And who knows? Maybe they are. The point is, so every country in the world clearly has the right to do these things. You're going to bomb them? So world war, if you don't do what we demand, even though we're the ones that screwed you last time? This seems like it's being manufactured. You know why? Because Israel's wanted this from this country for decades. He says, what the hell is this, Pepe Escobar? He says, a statement or a bloody gangster? Well, I think we know it's the latter, guys. Whitney's books will tell you that. Meanwhile, his bombing of Yemen continues. Yeah. Dr. Simon Godek says, let me get this straight. Trump is threatening Iran over hypothetical nukes, right? While Israel already has nuclear weapons and is openly committing genocide in Gaza. Want to work that one out for me? He says, where's that president of peace energy now that never existed? Who owns Trump? Because it sure as hell isn't the American people. Mel makes an excellent point. Israelis be like, Hamas is a death cult, and then have a plan to blow up the whole world if they don't get their way. Now, this is a book from Seymour Hersh, one of the most well-respected journalists and independent today, especially out there. And the book is entitled The Samson Option. If you don't understand this, it is a provable reality. It's their doctrine that should they feel that if they recognize Israel's about to be lost, they will launch nuclear weapons at everybody. Now you're starting to wonder why maybe there's blackmail for sexual reasons, or maybe it's because these people know that if they don't let them get their way, they're going to nuke the world. Certainly possible. All of this is real. This is what is holding the world hostage right now. And I'll include this for you. It's a 15-minute clip. It's worth watching from Propaganda & Co. saying the war isn't coming. It's already here. Leaked documents obtained by Ken Klippenstein from Pentagon contractors expose the full scope of Trump's secret war plan for Iran. Guys, you got to start calling this out, okay? This is coming. It's already being outlined, and it's not for American interests. Oliver Stone citing this guy basically breaking down a pretty long post, but basically saying, you know, conservatives are starting to call out some problems, which, by the way, I've been saying that from the beginning. He's saying many Trump loyalists and many non-aligned people who've been optimistic are beginning to acknowledge a growing disappointment. Also important to be honest about that, because it's pretty obvious right now. Outside of the inner circle that only scream, yay, we're saving the world no matter, excuse me, no matter what happens, which you know who we're talking about. Outside of that, it seems pretty common right now that people are going, something's wrong, because it is wrong. Find the courage to be honest about that. And that doesn't mean you're siding with anybody else. You're siding with honest people who care about the facts. That's the majority of the conversation right now. Pull away from the partisan game and you'll realize how inconsequential it is in the real conversation. And I don't mean that in the sense of who's influenced. They're clearly, the point is that to recognize the real conversation of people who are there, they're just not the ones in power. But my point is about how, you know, that's happening. And Oliver Stone says, what the hell's going on? Trump has turned into Biden, mercilessly, relentlessly bombing Yemen and aggressively seeking a new war with Iran. Well, the point is, yes, that's always been the case. Why people like even Oliver Stone didn't recognize that, I don't know. Because this is what we were screaming about before this election, and we were called blackpilled mercilessly. And now every single thing we were warning about is literally beginning to happen. And it's not trying to say I told you so. It's just, it is the reality. And so people like this are starting to go, what? How? I can't believe it. It's like, guys, what are you talking about? If you've been paying attention, you recognize the outcome, the action. The reality's always been there. They just scream different things. If we were able to deduce this was already going to happen because of just simply looking at past actions, so could have everybody else. But it says, why doesn't Trump at least meet with the Iranian leaders? Because he has no interest in doing so. It's about the outcome Israel wants. And he goes, as he did with North Korea. What's a good point, though, right? Because he did with North Korea. They criticized him. Why wouldn't he do it with Iran? He did it with Russia. I think you know why. He goes, why doesn't he educate himself a little and learn about the Yemeni and Iranian cultures? Because they have no interest in doing so. He says, always remember, the Parthians never gave in to Rome. The peace president, we didn't vote for this. So same point. Same point here too. I'll end with this. Liam McCollum interviewing Dave Smith, who, by the way, I've reached out to more than once. I'd be interested to have a conversation with him. I get the sense he just isn't, for some reason, TLAV is not allowed. But he says, if Donald Trump actually does launch a war in Iran, not only will I not support it, I will apologize for the rest of my life for voting for the guy. I'm really happy to see that, because he has a lot of sway with people in this conversation. Because I look in the larger partisan conversation, which I do still feel like he's a part of. He has more integrity, in my opinion, than most people in the conversation for many reasons. He's pulled back and forth based on things that I think, you know, are facts. Where here's the opinion and something shifts and he goes, okay, well, that's different now. If being able to evolve your opinion based on new information is a bare minimum for me in regard to respect in this field. And so what's important is I'm really glad that's happening. It will change people's minds. But my point is the same. I mean, I feel like this is like a 1 + 1 = 2. How we could have not already seen based on previous rhetoric, based on his own, I mean, everything in the conversation showed you this was coming. So, and again, and we were all yelling that beforehand. And people like this were calling us black. It's interesting. So I just think it behooves you to stand back and think about this. Partisanship has pretty clearly in this very short time frame misled a lot of people who might otherwise be honest. Just recognize that and start applying that wherewithal, the logic to what happens going forward. I think that's important. But I do think that people like him saying things like
they'll probably cheer.
Oops, sorry, I'm playing that on the way out. I think people like this saying things like this, especially people like him, is going to change the conversation. Now, the question beyond that is, how do we roll that into actual change? Now, that's the conversation I keep butting up against. Interestingly, I had a great conversation today about that on AM Wake Up, about violent reaction, you know, and whether that's necessary. And you know my stance on that. There is situations where that is something that even I would do. Defending my family, for example, 100%. As always, though, I don't think that's where we should be leaning into, and I think that's not the answer. Even when necessary, I do think it leads to negative outcomes. The bottom line is that we need to start thinking about how we make this reality happen without the classic idea of violent regime change, even with good intentions, because even that, especially today, will get co-opted. There's no way around it. You're going to have the same people with the same elements, the same political entities that just lean in and manipulate certain elements of it, and we will end up right back in the same place. Now, to be clear, there's no way to say, like I said, that there's not a circumstance where that becomes inevitable, like they were saying today on the show. The same old saying, right? If you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable, or peaceful resistance, or whatever the claim is. That seems to be what they're doing. But I will never, that is a line I will always stand by because I think it's important. But man, today, it is a time to make choices. I've never been in, I've only done this for, I don't know, a decade plus. But the truth is that I've never seen something that has alarmed me to the point to where I see real possible outcome. I've heard a lot of narratives and hype and, floated ideas, but we're seeing things that are superseding even the legislative process. Just like declaring things and then just going after it. Now, if we see enough pushback to where, maybe the judge's rulings or people in his own position, his own party start changing things and it gets pulled back, I'll at least feel a little bit better because that's usually what happens. The public screams and we'll have to wait a minute, right? We'll come back to it when they're not paying attention. But I'm not seeing that right now. So I think more than ever, we need people in the partisan field that are honest, which I think is the majority, just to start calling these things out and, make it clear. I still support Trump if that's what you think. I still believe in Republicans if that's what you believe. Doesn't change the fact that you can still stand up and say that is a problem. That's not what I voted for. That's unconstitutional. And I still vote for Trump. Whatever it is. You got to start calling out these basic facts because they're using it. And you know what? Here's an even better point to end on. It's always possible, maybe, that makes it easier for you that Trump and the rest, maybe they don't know they're being played. I don't agree with that. But recognize that maybe they need you to step up and say, hey, that's wrong. That's not what we believe. Well, here's why. Again, I think it's fruitless, but whatever it is, you need to recognize, I think we all need to recognize that now is the time to make those choices. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Now, again, on the end, I recommend, here, let me just include this. I have this on the show notes. But the Third Eye Carnival, for those that are considering this, it should be pretty damn cool. Here. Third Eye Carnival, the link is included. I believe it's 90 days or $90 for all 3 days. It's going to be pretty fun. First day being sort of a birthday bash. The next day being, I believe, most of the performances and music. And it's going to be pretty cool. All day event for all 3 days. I'll be there most of the time, I think. And really just come out to support Steve because he's the one pretty much putting this on. And he deserves, the point is that this is for us, for the people. And, bottom line is just like I think in the past, it's not even certain when he put this on that he was even going to make any money off it. It's just about doing this. So help him benefit from doing what I think is important anyway. But that's where I'll be. And like I said, I'm going to be trying to do work like my show as much as often as usual. And then trying to do some of the in the RV recordings that I might do some live, might record some. You'll see it. You'll be seeing it as it comes out over the next week. But it'll be cool because there's a lot of people there. I've discussed with Charlie Robinson to do sort of an in the TLAV RV on the road kind of interview. Pasta and Steve and I are probably going to do something in there. But I'm just going to be, hey, let's jump in there and do a quick little conversation. Maybe I'll put it out as one thing. I'm not sure. Maybe the easiest way to do it is probably just putting it out on my Substack. That way, it's just not going to be giving everybody notifications every time. But just tune in. Hope to see you there. And I'll probably be seeing you tomorrow. I imagine that my plan is to get some content out tomorrow as well. The third, I'll probably hang out with Steve for the most part. Maybe we'll see something on that day as well. And then the fourth, that'll be starting Carnival. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the early birthday wishes in the chat. Really just, as always, guys, I can't ever express how honored I am to have the kind of people we have in this community. And just how proud it makes me that I see every day people who are just in this chat who are just going like, man, this is what it's about. The open-minded conversation, amicable conversation, it's powerful. And you guys are what make this community. So thank you for being a part of this. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
If he launches a war in Iran. And then I saw one guy underneath that said, it goes, I know Dave Smith sure will. And okay, it's just like a comment on Twitter, but I was just like blown away. And I'm not blown away by much, but I was like, does anybody actually thinks I would, just because I'm like, well, I did support this guy, so I'll rationalize and like defend getting in another war in the Middle East? Is that, but just for anyone who may have that, I will say this. If Donald Trump actually does launch a war in Iran, not only will I not support it, I will apologize for the rest of my life for voting for the guy. That undoes any positive that might have come out of this. So just to be clear on that, it would be the most disastrous policy, and I just can't even believe, I mean, maybe that guy didn't even mean it, but I can't believe anyone would think, like, you know, that somehow we're now in the business of just sucking up to Donald Trump. Fuck that. I was as sharp as goddamn critic in his first 4 years. I was a pretty sharp critic for the next 4 years after that. And I supported him this time because it just seemed like in the moment we had two options and one was clearly preferable. But I have no loyalty toward Trump or anyone in his cabinet or anything about the administration. I have loyalty to my principles and my country and my family, but none of that leads towards supporting a war in Iran. Okay, go ahead, Rob. Anything you want to weigh in?